Welcome to our Learning Forward Colorado annual conference. I'm Veronica Anderson. You probably have seen my name in your emails. I am the co-president with Kelly Gaskell. So we're so excited because we have so many people here today. So welcome, and thank you for braving the cold weather. So glad you're here. LFC is an adaptive, current, and responsive professional learning organization, your learning organization, dedicated to supporting educator effectiveness, implementing the Colorado academic standards, and improving student learning through effective professional learning. Before I go on and on about who we are, I'd like to recognize some people in the room. First of all, I'd like to recognize our trustees. So if you're a trustee, please stand. Annie Hertz is our secretary. Mike Campbell, our past president. Thank you. I'd like to recognize our study team. If you are part of the study team, please stand up or wave so we can recognize you, because these are the people who have worked so hard to bring this conference to Colorado. So thank you so much. Lots of hard work. Thank you. Also, I'd like to recognize our Learning Forward Colorado board. So if you are a board member, please stand up so we can honor you today. John, thank you. And we have these cute little dangly red things. So if you need to talk to anyone or you need anything, please let one of us know. I'd also like to recognize the outreach team. Speak. My partner Julie Shaw is not here today. She was unable to attend. So welcome. Learning Forward Colorado strives to influence all educators who are involved in providing professional learning opportunities to adhere to the Learning Forward standards for professional learning. And on your tables, you will see the standards. So you're welcome to take that with you. Meeting these standards empowers educators at the school, district, and state levels to develop collaborative communities engaged in continuous cycles of improving teaching, leading, and learning. Further, we endeavor to honor educators and celebrate their passion for engaging effective professional learning every day so every student achieves. We are all about student achievement. Learning Forward Colorado believes the success of all students is dependent upon highly effective educators who engage in ongoing professional learning. And you see our logo there, advancing professional learning, expanding networking, and supporting collaboration. We are so glad you're here.
Hello everyone, I'm Kelly Gaskell, co-president with Veronica, and I just want to do three things. Recognize, first of all, two of our sponsors, well, partnerships. We played around with that term. But we have a great partnership with PEBC, Public Education Business Coalition, and they're in the back. I think we have Joyce and Annie here today. Are there others from PEBC here? Okay, glad you're here, thank you. They do a lot of great things in partnership with us, as well as Adams State University. So if you're interested in credit, there is a form in your folder if you'd like the credit. Liz with Adams State couldn't stay today, but she said that it's the yellow form in your folder. She said if you want to fill that out, you can leave it with us and we'll make sure they get it, or you can register online, okay? Right in front of that yellow form, if you just want hours instead of just credit, Learning Forward Colorado is providing that through the Colorado Department of Education too. So either way, you have options for today. So thank you PEBC, thank you Adams State University, thank you to the district that's providing this facility. We're very appreciative of that as well. Also, I didn't get a chance to speak to them, but I think we have some people here from the Colorado Department of Education as well. Is that true? Well, they registered. Okay, well maybe they're on their way. So we're really looking forward to forging that partnership with the Colorado Department of Education too. Veronica mentioned the standards. We aren't a state. Some of our states have the professional learning standards mandated, which is something we don't want to do in Colorado, but we do want to influence people to really use our standards because they lead you to quality professional learning. The other thing is just some logistical things in your folder. On the right side, if you've had a chance to sort through a little bit, are all of Bruce Wellman's handouts that he'll be working with today. So he'll be addressing those. On the left side is our agenda. So we have a full morning with Bruce. We're so excited about that. You can see when we're having lunch. After lunch, we will be presenting the O'Rourke Prize. Very excited about that, and we'll be recognizing some of our former O'Rourke Prize winners at that time and announcing our O'Rourke Prize winner for this year. Behind the agenda, there is a flyer for summits. We have great professional networking opportunities, and our next one is coming up in January 9th, being hosted at PEBC. They're great 2-hour opportunities. You can see the title there. They're free. That means you don't pay. They're free. A really nice opportunity to talk, to talk about the work that is so important that we do, that sometimes we don't have time to have those conversations. The next flyer talks about academies that Learning Forward can help design for you to fit your district's needs. Those are typically done on site in your district, so if you have some interest in those, again, look for people that have the name tag like this, and we can tell you more if you're interested. The next one, of course, is the feedback form. We're all about getting feedback. We want to make sure this meets your needs, so before you leave today, leave that with us. And then there are the 2 forms. If you want recertification hours, it's there. If you want credit, then you can get that through Adams State University. Okay?
Good morning. It is so great to see a room full of educators with such amazing energy. You can, as Kelly was saying, you can feel it in the room today. So we thank you for being here. As educators, we all kind of have that mindset of, we know what it took for you to be here today. And on Monday, you'll be picking up all the pieces for what you have to do in order for you to be here today. But it says so much about who you are as educators and leaders in Colorado. It says that you value your own learning in order for you to be better at the work that you do and what you give to the people around you when you go back to work on Monday. And I promise you that you will have some amazing learning that will stay with you, and you will have some important thinking or strategy or idea that will linger with you for a long time. So as we think about today's work and the power of social capital and what that brings to all of us in the work of education, and your anticipation about your learning today, just take a minute right now and whisper to the person next to you, this is what I'm here for to learn about today. Just take 2 minutes to do that. I was doing some thinking over the last few weeks about what do I say about this amazing person you get to work with today. And I thought back to my first experience of working with Bruce. And Bruce, it was 28 years ago. It was scary to think about, really? It's been that long. When I started staff development work 28 years ago, the person who had the position before me had set up about 5 different staff development opportunities for schools in the area where I was working. And those staff development opportunities were with Bruce Wellman. And so within my first couple of months of work, I was on the phone with him. We were planning, we were talking. I was picking him up from the airport and taking him back a lot. And on the way, we were talking and I was learning. I was chauffeuring him from school to school. And on the way, we were talking and I was learning. And then I kind of had to hang out at the schools all day and watch him in action, and I was soaking in everything. I can't tell you how much Bruce has shaped my life, my career in staff development. He modeled for me, he coached me, he mentored me, and I'm not sure he really even knew that. Look at him, he's going, what? That was 28 years ago. And today, we have the opportunity for our paths to cross again. And throughout my career, I have been amazed at the times that our paths have crossed, and I've had an opportunity to continue learning from him. When he wasn't around, he probably doesn't know this either, but I would read some of the things that he's written so that his voice would stay in my head. And he has many books, and some of you may know them. Adaptive Schools, Mentoring Matters, Data-Driven Dialogue, trying to think of some of the others I draw. Got Data Now What? Groups at Work, Learning Focused Supervision, all of those. And I can find his voice in there, and they guide me in the work that I do. Today, you have the opportunity to learn with Bruce Wellman and from Bruce Wellman, to see him in action as a model, as a mentor, as a guide, as a guru, as a coach, as a thinker, and as one of our premier staff developers in this country, I would say. So, would you help me welcome my friend and my colleague, Bruce Wellman.
That's classic. Wow. Wow. I guess I got to do this so you can hear me. Well, thank you all. It's always Hold Home Week coming back here. Kelly and I were commenting on the little shade change in the times we've known each other, and I see Marianne and other people in the back. So again, it has been close to 30 years drifting in and out of the Mountain State and watching your politics drifting out of different things. Well, enough about that, right? Social media is going to meet social capital today. So if you'll do a couple things here, what those are. Learning Forward has a hashtag if you are on Twitter. Learning Forward also has a Twitter address. There's mine. And for the teams, if someone who's got a laptop, an iPad, an iPhone, if you'll also log into today's meet, there's going to be a couple points we're going to try to collect some information. And so if you have, you can also log in later because where's Liz? There she is, Liz Wall from Douglas County as our tech guru today. We're going to try to also put in references as well. So if a citation comes out of my mouth, I'll have some little bit on the screen, but you can also, we'll try to get the fuller citations up there as well. Today's meet, there'll be a couple points where you'll be doing some table group conversations. There'll be a summary point. If someone will post your table group summaries there, we can have a running record of the conversation today as well. Special feature today, new friends from South High, and one of the things I appreciate about working with Chris-Ann and colleagues in Learning Forward is they expect to collaborate. They don't say, Bruce, come do your thing for a day. We have been co-constructing and thinking about this and also bringing local voice to this conversation. And so after the break, we're actually going to do a mini kind of basically a public coaching conversation, and we'll introduce people to you then to find out what's this work really live and look and live like at the ground level. Because there's lovely research you'll hear come out of my mouth, but there's also reality and practicality. And so in terms of today, it really is that title. How do we amplify the power? All schools have social capital. Some have more than others. And so the question is, what is it? And how do we get more of it? And what happens when it's not there? And so one of the pieces that's starting to emerge strongly is the leadership roles in that. And the new issue, I think the driving issue that Learning Forward itself is onto, is how do you lead teacher leaders? And how do teacher leaders negotiate and navigate the relationship with their peers? Because it's a different kind of relationship. It's not authoritarian, not hierarchical, it's influence. So how do you amplify influence? And how do you recognize the influencers who are already in your schools as well, because they're there as well? So that's essentially the headline. And how do we get more of that, what you see in the image right there? And how do we notice what of those conversations add value to teaching and learning, and what are just doing business? So some purposes. You'll see page numbers on the top, and two big ideas today. Also probably be very practical to put your name on your materials. You will be mixing and matching occasionally today, but I'll name that. So how do we define and apply this concept? You're going to have two major ways of operating today to get at that. Many of you are in teams today. We were assuming team structure, so there'll be some meaningful kind of table group home base exercises and activities and conversations. And also, you'll mix and match for some content bits with people from other teams and then come back. So it'll kind of be an in and out pattern to get at that. So we can also tap the social capital in this room as well. As you know, what I'm doing up here is of very little importance. What matters is what goes on in your head and between your heads as well. And that's true in the classroom as well. So how do we do that? Well, we need tools. And one of the pieces that is very clear, both in the literature and in the practice, is you can't just put people in the room and say, tag, you're a team, do wonderful things. We'll come back in a couple of years and see instructional improvement in the school. It takes structure. So we're going to do structure, macro, structural, micro. There's a lot of little nitty-gritty things that really matter. A group of 8 at a table is not a powerful professional conversation, because if you watch a group of 8, there's many people at the table not participating. So how do we amp up, participate, true participation? And the issue here is we're going to link several ideas. This notion of social capital to collaboration, to the notion of collective intelligence. So I'm going to drop a few bombs on you later this morning about what does it mean to be a smart group. Because there are smart groups and there are absolutely dumb groups. And there's also dumb groups made up of really smart people. So smart people themselves don't make smart groups. Aha. So here we go. Now, here is kind of just a little background. Capital itself is a monetary metaphor. And the classic definition is this. It's basically money that produces money, or better, wealth that produces more wealth. So we talk about capital expenditures when we construct budgets. We endow capital for institutions. We sometimes, the nonprofits want us to donate to the capital fund as well. It also has this quality. It's a group's worth. So there's human capital and collective capital as well. But you notice capital is something we leverage to get goals. In and of itself, it doesn't have any value. It needs to be goal-oriented. But what makes it social is when the goals are shared. No sharing, no ownership, no accomplishment. And so notice she can have capital, but she is pointing at a chart that's got some purpose and goal statements, and clearly implied is there's a group out there that she's adjusting towards that energy. Now, a couple bits here that are important. If you look at the literature now, you see lots of modifiers to the word capital. Some of you may know Michael Fullen and Andy Hargrave's book. It's called Professional Capital. I just spent some time with Andy a couple weeks ago and got to talk. But human capital in schools means the talent base, knowledge, skills, background, educational levels. I was working with a pretty high-performing high school the other day in Illinois. Had all the team leaders, department heads. It's a huge school, 4,000 kids in one high school. So clearly the teacher leaders really matter. A department might have 40 teachers in it. So that's a different scale. But one of the phys ed teachers I was talking to, the phys ed teachers have multiple master's degrees. And kinesiology and curriculum, that's you think the jocks? No, they're not the jocks. They teach health and wellness and lifelong work. They've got human capital. And those departments do amazing things because of that. We hire for that. hopefully. And that's what the whole issue about standards for professionalism are all about. What your HR people look for makes a difference. And then we get this issue. My friends Art Costa and Bob Garmston and Diane Zimmerman have a book with that title, Cognitive Capital. It's the mental resources available inside an organization. It can mean the smarts, but it can also mean the heuristics, the tools. Do we have cognitive capital? Do we have ways of thinking? And as you know, Costa and Garmston wrote a book called Cognitive Coaching. They spent a little energy on that. So how do we build cognitive capital? If you go back to those definitions, wealth that produces more wealth, resources that can be leveraged. And then there's Hargreaves' work and Fullen's work, and they basically say it's human capital meets social capital meets decisional capital is what their construct that produces professional capital. So decisional capital, interesting thing. Do we have a toolkit for making decisions that turn into productive action? We can be convivial, we can be collaborative, but without enough decisional oomph, things don't change, things don't move. And then finally we get to this issue of the social. The social. What does this mean to have social capital in that way? And so here is, I think, some of the stuff I want to break down for that, just as background, then I'll put you to work at a tabletop, which is this. Fullen and Hargreaves in their book, Professional Capital, talk about that. I'm going to come back to that issue. Again, these are all scalable from low to high. Trust is a capital. So what does that mean? Trust means lovely things like integrity, you're going to follow through. Sometimes it manifests itself. We make a decision here. I can trust that you're going to go do it in your classroom. Trust is also based on things like competence. I trust in your competence. Got to have that. True collaboration, not contrived. We are co-constructing, co-creating, co-analyzing. Collaborare means to work together. Do I see my work as related to your work? Now in schools, collaboration has both a horizontal and a vertical quality as well. And I do think that the Common Core is amplifying the need for that. Can we collaborate across content areas? I was talking to some social studies people the other day, and they are realizing they have to reach out in their high school to the English teachers and to the science teachers on things like argumentation. Are we talking about the same thing, about how to reason, how to give voice, how to listen to other kids? Well, if they're not on the same plane, then one department's contradicting another department. Some of you are nodding like you're having that conversation, right? Yeah. I actually have in my file, this will date me, it's a fax, a photocopy of a fax from, I won't name the district, but there's people from the district in the room. A high school kid had written it back when we were talking outcomes and standards. A student wrote a letter to the student newspaper, really addressed to the staff, saying, would you guys get your act together? My English teacher keeps contradicting my history teacher on the qualities of good writing. I don't know who to listen to. So I basically have a schizophrenic brain. I write an English teacher paper and a history teacher paper, but I would get a B on one and an A on the other, but I have to make sure I give it to the right teacher. You're making us nuts. You better collaborate. And then this one's huge. This is big in the literature. Collective responsibility for student learning. All kids belong to all of us. Which means the worst case scenario, as soon as we put an IEP on a kid, classroom teacher doesn't own the kid anymore. He's a special needs kid, or that's an ELL. As soon as we label kids, we don't own them. Now the difference on that is, I just saw something in literature, nice anecdote. A writing award was given to a high school kid. And usually in this state, the senior English teacher goes and gets the award with the teacher. Well, this guy had the smarts to bring all the other teachers who taught her with him. So I didn't teach her how to write. She could write when she got to my class. Here's grade 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. He went back to elementary school. He said, these people taught her how to write. Notice we're in it together, which means we need to have common standards, common beliefs. And huge. That one's huge. Here's the issue, and Andy Hargraves, I heard him say this the other day when I was with him. He said, in cultures of isolation, where there's autonomy, we don't talk, we don't share, only two kinds of people seek or get help: the novice and the incompetent. So if you seek help, you're one of those two. So I don't seek help because I don't want to be perceived as being incompetent. Now, if you flip, Milbury McLaughlin and Joan Talbot wrote a wonderful book called Professional Community and the Work of High School Teaching. So they drilled down into some high schools in Silicon Valley, got deep inside the schools, hung out, but they looked at the department level. And they noticed the difference between one department and the other. One department, if you had a great lesson, you'd come back to the department office and say, hey, I just knocked it out of the park today. The other teachers would say, what'd you do? That's a good idea. I think I'll try that. You sunk it up first period, you come back and say, oh my God, that failed. What'd you do? We can fix that. And they would huddle and fix it. Then they interviewed the teachers about their perceptions of the students. Well, that department, they thought these kids are bright, they're eager, they're fun to work with. Down the hall, the autonomous department, where they never talked, never shared, asked them about the kids. Oh, these kids are kind of just high school kids. Some of them are a pain in the ass. So who we are to one another as adults influences our perceptions and our relationships with kids. And by the way, the kids know the sociology. Go into an elementary school and ask the fifth graders to draw the map of teacher relationships. Give them a piece of white, give them a whiteboard. They can draw it. They know. They know. They're watching. They're paying attention. And then finally, that's huge. I think it's the new interview question. Describe your network to me. How do you reach out? How do you reach out? Having a coffee with a science teacher I know. I'm going to Toronto next week, outside of Toronto. Well, I know Beth from seminars, but I follow her on Twitter because she's really into problem-based learning. I know stuff. She'll post questions up. Every time I see a question from her, I zap it back to her. She knows how to reach out. It's teachers who reach out. There's a primary teacher I follow in Saskatchewan who's got the most brilliant use of technology in a primary school I've ever seen. Well, she's worth following. So how do you network? Who do you call? And so it turns out that one of the challenges in schools is where the team is too locked together. In the research, it's called self-sealing logic. Well, groups that are good groups know when they're stuck and they know when to reach out. But it also turns out that the most valuable team members are the ones that have the best networks in the organization. They know who knows. I was 150 years ago, about the time I met Chris Ann, I was working in a national, federally funded science program, and we were developing a curriculum for elementary schools that would work in urban schools. How do we get hands-on science into urban schools? Sometimes had sync, sometimes didn't have sync, yada, yada, yada. But we found for our teacher teams, we sorted for not the ones who were the most science prone, we sorted for the ones that had the best networks. So we found this one school that had science supplies coming out their ears. It turned out this woman knew everyone in the district. I think they were all her cousins, and they were cleaning. Anytime they cleaned a warehouse out, she'd show up with a U-Haul and put it in her truck and take it to her school. She knew people. She knew people, and if she didn't know, she knew who knew. When I ran a curriculum for a district in Concord, Mass, my secretary knew all the other secretaries. So if I screwed up on a bus for field trips, she would just get on the phone, work it out with the transportation people and the budget people, and get me the buses, because she had a network. She had job security for sure, because she knew who knew. She knew who knew. So you notice when we talk about social capital, it's a lot of those things. It's a lot. It's not just relationships in a team. Now, because the metaphor is so strong, I invite you to do a table group task. And when I offer table group tasks, I'm going to assume that you can self-organize. I want to suggest that groups of 8 may be unwieldy. So you may want to just figure out subdivisions so there's 4 and 4 working. I would not try to do any of this with anything bigger than a 6, I think. But what you need, so do 2 things right now before I give you the task. Number 1, figure out what your working group's going to be, where you're going to, if you're going to divide up, where the dividing points are. Number two, one of you please be noble at this hour and volunteer to be a recorder for a very quick exercise. So grouping and recording. So sort that and then look back to me. When we encounter something new, we use comparisons. We say, oh, that's like. If you've ever eaten frog or snake or iguana, you'll always say, it's like. Everything tastes like chicken, by the way, right? So you say, oh, that's like. That's the metaphorical brain at work. I was in Costa Rica once. They were selling chicken of the tree. It turned out to be iguana burgers. So, it's like right? So, you gotta be brave. Now, because metaphors are so powerful, we're going to attach metaphors to this concept, because that is essentially a metaphor. So how is this concept like that image? So that's your task, about a half a dozen ideas real fast. And so you can look at the image or what the image implies and just let it rip. And so again, give people in your working group a chance to generate some ideas and play off one another idea, and then we'll select some ideas to share. Challenge round now. You're going to select your favorite idea, and we're going to sample. And what Liz just showed me is some of you are popping ideas up on today's meet, which is just great. But select a favorite and probably a fallback just in case. We're going to sample, probably not going to hear from every working group, but maybe hear 6 to 8 of these just to have a sense of the room as well. So that means 2 bits. A selection, and then please identify a spokesperson. And then I'll name the protocol for getting ideas out. Okay, so about 78 seconds for that choice. We'll see. It's decisional. Okay. Make them big. I am cross-eyed tired. Okay. Very simple protocol. Okay. And thank you. So become a large group again with your energy organized for listening to one another. So here's the next step. Rather than me play bossy teacher and point at table groups, spokespeople are going to self-identify and stand and share. Now if you're at the front, don't talk to me, talk to your colleagues. So we're going to go for listen carefully to previous ideas and then go for maximum variety. So again, we'll go 6, 8, and then I'll maybe cut you off. But who will go first and set the standard? Now here's the standard for projection and clarity. So please read the stem and fill it in. So boom it out.
Social capital is like gold coins because you have to be aware of your balance.
Social capital is like beer, I would like to drink alone. We said social capital is like an investment because you start with a little bit, but the more that you invest time-wise and energy-wise, the more reward you get out.
Social capital is like cooking, like different recipes because you got different parts, you got different preferences, sequences, timing, quality.
Social capital is like a bank because you can make multiple withdrawals and deposits.
And
Social capital is like money. The more you have, the richer you are.
thank you. And let's do uno, dos, and then back to me.
Social capital is like
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Here's the math lesson we need to give every 17-year-old, I think, which is have them look at a compound interest table. Because interest compounds. It's the interest on the interest. And so we notice the banking and the investment metaphors are so powerful here. Now, the question is, you need some initiating capital, which I will believe is always present, but sometimes blocked in schools. How do you unblock it? And then how do you get it to compound or amplify, another word for that. So here's our thought. We've done that well. We're in the middle of that, defining it. What do we mean by social capital, both by definition, by metaphor, and by practice? Big idea here, which is the notion of a community of thought. So in the middle of this section on Watching Time, will be our little fishbowl kind of interview here. But what does it mean? Well, if we have social capital, it means we think together. So what does thinking together mean in the context of any group, but in the context of schools, to be a community? So there's a couple of big ideas there. And then going to do an insert in the afternoon on some predictable dynamics in groups. I was listening to the Writer's Almanac on public radio early this morning, and there's a lovely quote from P.J. O'Rourke, the humorist and writer from New Hampshire, who says, every person the type in the world you already know because they went to high school with you. Well, we understand group dynamics. I was watching a movie with my wife, and she lived in a little town in Ohio, so her graduating class was essentially her nursery school class, or preschool class. They just all grew up together, 40 of them that graduated together. And she'll say, oh, some character movie, that's just like, that one's just like, and we get archetypes. And here's the important piece. They're normal. They're normal. And so just remember, the people that annoy you are sometimes annoyed by you. So it all works out just fine. And then, how do we structure success? So take a look at some nitty-gritty structuring pieces as well there. And so be tools, tips, and some concepts along the way, and then end of the day, and then a couple levels of feedback, assessment, and so continue the flow here of back channel and back chat. That'll be quite useful. Here is where we're headed. This is the fundamental research on social capital. It lives on page 4, but I put this matrix together as a way to talk about it. This is one of the articles that in fact got us all started on this conversation almost a year ago, chatting back and forth. A woman named Carrie Liana did this work, and the citations on the bottom of page 4. The important piece about this research is the size of the research base, 1,000 teachers. So if you think about 1,000 4th and 5th grade teachers with, let's imagine, 25 kids apiece, that's a lot of data and a big N, and a lot of education research doesn't have that big an N. And so pretty solid stuff, and it's also controlled. The best research tends to be in mathematics because it's so easy to quantify the gains. So you'll see a lot of the best, and by the way, some of the really best professional development research is about mathematics as well, because you can get inside, watch teachers interact, and also when we get to human capital, social capital, it's really easy to get the construct of which teachers know more or less in that arena as well. So we've got 2 dimensions there. Human capital, so here are these elementary teachers. The human capital will be their pedagogical skills in general, meets their mathematical knowledge and their what's called pedagogical content knowledge. Isn't that a fancy phrase? You can know math, but not know pedagogy. I was looking at a doctoral dissertation from a science guy I met in New York State, and he controlled for science knowledge, but then looked at which teachers were producing the most gains, and it was the ones that had pedagogical content knowledge. One form of that, recently unearthed by another science guy, was looking at assessments. The best teachers could predict which wrong answers would be the high-frequency wrong answers. They understood kid misconceptions. That's pedagogical learner and pedagogical content knowledge. Well, what she's looking at, and her colleagues were looking at, is how do those 2 constructs intersect? high personal capital, human, and high social. And what happens if it's low or not? And that's the brilliant piece here. Obviously, you have high human capital, high social capital, you get measurable gains. We're talking percentage, 5, 6, 10, and I think the highest ones are like 15% gains. That means I know math, but I also have other people who want to talk about math. We talk math. Now, the parallel to that is a school I've been in and out of in Tucson. Marco Ramirez, who is at the school, the parents demanded the school go K-8 from K-5. They didn't want to lose their kids to a mediocre middle school, so they said, extend it, and they talked the board into it. Well, Marco knows math, but he also knows this. And he also has a brilliant instructional coach. Marco and Chris wrote a really nice book for Heinemann about math as the vehicle for school change. Well, Marco has that school, high ELL, high free lunch, typically number 2, 3, 4 in the state in 3rd grade math. Because you're on one of my teams, weekly we come to the table with assessments. It's on the table. So total transparency about what's going on in the classrooms. You don't get to hide in your room. Don't come teach you if you don't want to do that. Now he's the lowest threat guy you'd ever meet. They both got great coaching skills. So they make meaning of the work. Now what their challenge is of late, because of the ELL population, is how do you keep those gains as the language issues. So they've got good literacy people starting to work with them now to kind of amp that up as well. Because their goal is to be that high in 5th grade and high in 8th grade as well. So again, they want to be up there across the lens. But so if we're sharing, talking, we go there. The scary piece of that is there. I don't know math, and I don't talk to anybody else about it. So that's, remember, it's 1,000 teachers, so that could be hundreds of teachers down there. If we work in isolation and can't reveal our not knowing. See, the one issue about reaching out is I have to feel safe to talk about what I don't know. And you notice, math is one of those things that we're supposed to know, but boy, high school people, when I talk to high school math teachers and they talk about the kids they're most concerned about, it's 4th and 5th grade math skills. It's basically arithmetic, ratio, proportion, fractions, and how to divide and multiply. That's 4th and 5th grade stuff. And so if my kids are getting out of 5th grade without that stuff, they're screwed. So notice, if we live in this world, we've condemned kids to probably not having a good time the rest of their life. They're screwed. So notice, how do we get people to build a world where we reveal that? Now here's the best piece of this. If you have high social, low human, you end up with average gains. You pull the performance up. You pull it up. Now at a micro level, I was doing some mentor work in a little school in New Hampshire several years ago, and I looked at the data for this 5th grade team. They had a beginning teacher and 2 veteran teachers, and the 2 veterans are both mentoring the beginning teacher. Well, you couldn't tell looking at the aggregate data which class the kids came from. Raw first-year teacher performing at the level of veterans. I said, how'd you do it? They said, oh, real simple. We gave her the lesson plans for the first semester. We said, do this, because this is the lesson we're doing today. At the end of the day, we'll debrief and talk about it. So they planned, taught, debriefed the same lessons. Said, your job is to learn kids, learn teaching techniques, get good relationships, learn how to manage the class. We'll teach you the rest of this over the next couple of years. So notice, welcome to social capital on the 5th grade team. They would have all been up there. So we can lift low performers up, but once again, you can't be in that world Andy Hargraves described, which is that if you reach out, you're permanently seen as having the scarlet eye for incompetent on your chest your whole career. I have to be able to reach out. So how do we structure for reaching out? What are the things that make a difference? Now in this work and some later work I'm going to talk about, there's an important leadership role. In Carrie Leanna's work, it's this. It's the principal role. So in these schools, and so obviously we're in New York City, principals need to network. Networking principals are a force to behold. They got resource in their school, and they know who to reach out to. Who to reach out to. External social capital. I was in a school once in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and early on they had a computer lab that was just off the scale. Mini computer, this is back in the 80s, lots of terminals. Kids could go in for tutorials, customize stuff, and I looked at it and said, wow, this computer lab's cool. And he just went, I don't see a computer lab. What are you looking at? I said, oh, so what am I seeing? He said, you're seeing some furniture. Oh, and why was the furniture purchased? Because the federal government gave us a lot of money for desegregation, and we thought we could desegregate the school with good furniture. It just happens to have processors in it. And I said, and we just got a memory upgrade because I was at a banquet, and the guy who is the president of the company that built the computer happened to be next to him. And I just managed to spend the dinner convincing him I needed a core memory upgrade. That's an external network. I know how to reach out. I know how to get stuff from my teachers. I know how to connect them as well. And those are also the principals that get their lead teachers out to conferences. And now I worked in a system, my first ASCD conference, I was actually a third grade teacher, and they said, you've got some potential, we'll send you to the conference. And we'll pay for it. Oh, that's cool, all right. But they build resource, and here's the critical thing. They build teacher social capital. Now, one of the unknowns right now, getting some glimmers, is how do you lead teacher leaders? How do you grow and develop them? And what's the relationship, the supervisory relationship between the principal and the teacher leadership, supervising them for that aspect of their craft, not just the classroom aspect. And that's turning out to be a very, very important role. And where's the line? And there's a tough one. And I'll name the ugly little subset in this. I have a team. I'm facilitating, got a pretty good set of skills, but I've got a teacher who's an outlier pain in the ass. Far, far away, I've heard somebody talk about that, right? Not in this state. What's the principal's role as a supervisor? And if you look at your standards for teaching, it doesn't matter how brilliant that person is in the classroom. If they're sucking the life out of their colleagues, there needs to be consequences. That's a supervisory task. You can't lay that on your teacher leaders. Now that's a piece that's in there, and we'll come back to that a little bit. But it's how do you develop in that? It's time. And I'm looking at how schools are getting time to do this. I just happened to be with Adlai Stevenson High School, which some of you may know is the PLC mothership. Well, yeah, it's kind of a hoot. They're in their second generation now. New superintendent, solid principal. I worked with them a while ago, but most of the department heads are fairly new. They have team leaders because, for example, Spanish 2 has 10 teachers. That's a team to look at data. But they are getting their act together to go to the school board to get more time, because they get about 90 minutes every 3 weeks for real team time. But they need more. Concord, New Hampshire was up there this summer doing some work. They are experimenting with, and I need to get the source, a 6-day rotation. So I'm trying to, how do you teach first graders? It's day 6, not Friday, or whatever day it is. The goal is to buy an hour every 6 days for teachers to work unencumbered for planning time, collaborative time. Early release, for example. And we need space and we need staff. Staffing means the leadership staffing and sometimes coverage staffing, so you can get teachers freed, both to free teacher leaders to coach and mentor and for teams to meet as well. So that's pretty solid stuff, and that's coming up in multiple sources. Now where that takes us to is this issue, and some of you may know there's a brand new edition of Megan Tasher-Morin's book, Trust Matters. It's a lovely book if you don't know it. She's got some kind of case studies around that she's built the research on. And so there's some nice vignettes that run. But this is the issue, and this is going to overlap nicely with the previous work on social capital and collaboration, because there is a trust issue here, and just to make sure we're on the same thing. I have to assume to trust you. Now, this can go teacher to principal, but also now teacher to teacher leader, that you have positive intentions and appreciation and fairness. The fairness thing is quite interesting. You have to define fair. You have to define fair. And it's an interesting dilemma because there's three major ways people talk about fair. One is we slice the pie up. I had two brothers, so who has the bigger slice was a big deal, right? Everyone gets an equal slice. Another kind we do fair is need. We apportion the need. A friend of mine in a big high school, actually it was South High, but in Minneapolis, he showed the budget to his department chairs for the first time. They'd never seen the budget. And they could talk about fair. Now fair means, you guys haven't had any new materials for a while, let's shift budget to your department. But they can only do that if there's transparency. And then, so we've got those two. And then there's an interesting kind of fair that's the kind of the fly in the ointment to some degree. So notice we've got equal slice, there's need, and then there's this whole funny piece about fair, which is wants versus needs. Is it a want or a need? Because we now have power and favor and all that kind of stuff that colludes and messes up the fair thing. People use favors, and that's when benevolence has a dark side. Buy people off, and we get in trouble with fair with that. Obviously, there's an honesty thing here, truth-telling. Tony Brake's work and Barbara Schneider's is a big study, some of you may know, called Trust in Schools. They were deep inside Chicago schools. Well, it turns out the principal, in the years they did that study, there were school councils that hired principals, not the district. So community councils, and they tended to hire by race and ethnicity. But the guy on the study that came out the highest was a white guy in an all-black school. Highest ratings for trust. And what people said in the interviews is, A, he listens and he gets what you're all about. Then he tells you absolutely where he stands on the issue, whether he agrees with you or not. And then in a public meeting, he'll tell you the same thing he told you in private. Now, the guy with the lowest trust said whoever talked to him last, that was what would come out of his mouth in the meeting. Kind of the appeasers. So now, imagine principal versus teacher leader. For teacher leaders, these are the people I live with in my micro world. So how do you operate with authenticity, but also taking responsibility? Because if you try to lay it off on somebody else, well, I don't want to do this task, and really, I know you don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, but we have to do it. Those people get in trouble. Next is openness. Human stuff, it's open communication, sharing information. So for example, here's the budget. Here's what Leadership Council talked about. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. And then, very straightforward, is do what you say you're going to do, and there's consistency. And that's the grapevine quality. It's watching principals. You know when principals have been around just long enough where you go hang out in the soccer field? So two parents are talking, and the veteran parent says, don't even try that. You can't get away with that with her. She's not going to let you do that for her kid, because here's why. So you notice it's what's the grapevine say? You're only as good as that, by the way. And that's true at teacher leader level and principal level as well. But reliability is an interesting construct because it means you're diligent, consistent, and you follow through. You follow through. And finally, the last one, then I'll give you a chance to chat a little bit. I can like you, but not think you're competent. By the way, I can also trust people I don't like. My business partner's daughter once said when she was in high school, she was just talking, I said, how's about 10th grade? She said, how's school? She said, okay. And I knew she loved social studies. I said, so how's your social studies teacher? She said, well, I don't like him, but he's a really good teacher. Not bad for a 16-year-old to figure that one out. Now, in this case, though, competence means you've got technical skills. In the Leadership Act, it nowadays increasing is competence in the coaching conversation, competence in running meetings, in facilitating process, and for all roles now, conflict resolution. You've got to be competent in conflicting situations. And again, people can separate liking you from appreciating that. That's a lot for a burst. So take a moment with near neighbors. So probably not all table groups, we can maximize the conversation, 2s, 3s. And how does that check out for you in terms of when you start to think about social capital with the important bit of trust? How does that connect to your world? Okay, so try it out, and also you can pop some stuff up on our back channel as well as ideas occur. As an example of this Cosner reference, Liz is going to pop this up on today's meet. It's an article from the Ed Administration Quarterly on building capacity, building organizational capacity through trust. Now, he was looking at this through the role of the principal. I'm going to suggest you can hear it through principal eyes and through teacher leader eyes. These dimensions would suggest that they very much are true. So it's a goal. It's a goal. And as you know, it's a fragile resource. You can blow it. And so recovering, right? Recovery. So if it's a goal, I blow it, I've got to fix it. Got to fix it. But you'll notice that what they notice is over time, where social capital emerges strongly, it's that principals care about this stuff. They're paying attention. And they're looking at trust between principal-teacher, teacher to teacher, teacher to student, and teacher to parents. Because when that's there, teachers are perceived as being more credible. And an interesting new work emerging on teacher credibility. It's kids perceiving, I can learn from this person, and parents perceiving, this person can teach my children. With increasingly diverse interactions, that's not casual. It takes intentionality. And strong norms. Notice they articulate strong norms and they defend them. Now, norms, interesting, 2 related words to the word norm. One is normal, what's normal around here, and also what is normative. I was in a high school recently that I hadn't been in 10 years. 50% of the staff had changed, but the culture was absolutely recognizable as the culture from 10 years previous. Because people, it's the normative nature of organizations. So how do you mess with unproductive norms? I'm going to come back to that later today. But a norm means norms of things like civility, norms of transparency, norms of communication. A number of years ago in a little district in Kansas, I was doing some collaborative skills training. We had a multiple year project. Year 1, teacher leaders and principals in the room. So we worked on the norms of collaboration, lots of communications tools, and I made them look me in the eye and promise they would not try to teach any of what we were working on to the staff for a year. Go out and model. Just go be those things and do those things. The next year, bring your teams. Well, the second summer is the easiest summer I've ever had. I want to be like him. When he's in the room, we have great conversations. What's he doing? Well, there's some simple things that you can do. But that's the power of norms. Norms and the normative quality. Structures, and those 2 things, right? Structures for collaborating and structures for shared decision making. And the second one's huge, huge. The trust and morale thing is often conflated with bad or dishonest decision making. You invite teachers to participate and they feel like they have already made it, you're just playing the game with us. So how do we have clarity of that? And of decision-making models, by the way, which is a whole other seminar. And then, that's huge. If you look at the work on conflict in schools, you get in trouble when principals or teacher leaders think they can handle the conflict. You also get in trouble when the teacher leaders and principals run from the conflict. So what are the tools for conflict? And they are largely communication skills. Knowing how to be in dialogue, knowing how to be in discussion, and knowing how to be in decision making. And remember, in decision making, you can anticipate. Most decisions tend to be about the yes, but every yes has an implied no. So you've got to be willing to go into the no. The question is, if we're going to do this, what are we going to stop doing? I was talking to some people. There's a model called the responsive classroom. Know those people, work with them. Well, they have to confront and make those pro-social behaviors work. You've got to get teachers to stop doing some things, or PBIS. You've got to get some things to stop. The way we talk to kids, the way we talk, well, those are hard decisions because you have to call one another on it. I was in a Vogue school one day, and I noticed in the hall on Friday afternoon, the deal is every teacher in the hall, outside your classroom, as kids leave, so we can talk to kids as they go. Well, the thing they had to deal with is you have permission to go get your knock on your neighbor's door if she's not out in the hall, because we've agreed we're out there. And what I heard teachers doing is talking to kids. I mean, they said, yeah, take your hat off. But they also were doing the, hey, great job, Juan. In the lab today, that was a cool thing you did with that kid. And they're talking kids and naming kids and complimenting them on what they were doing. Or, wow, tough choice, but you did the stand-up thing today. Or, we've got an exam next week, so don't blow the weekend. So just all that human stuff. And that school was calm and clean, and kids made eye contact with you, and it was because they said that really matters, that we're present with one another. But boy, that decision to knock on your neighbor's door, that took a few meetings to make sure that people were all right with that. It took a little role playing too, because of building new norms. It's not a typical behavior. Well, here is a typical behavior in my seminars, at least. As I said, you're going to do some work in your teams, but you're also going to mix and match for some paired work that'll be both text-based, conversational-based idea generation. So in your handout, please turn to that page. Some different layers of technology. And the intention of this is this: the pair is the single most efficient unit of interaction. And I'll make a case, this is a foreshadow for the work we're going to do on structuring, that most groups would be better off if they did more paired work and less committee of the whole work. The committee of the whole is not productive. If I want to build relationships and get to know people, I get to know people by real work with one another, not sitting at the table with a bunch of people who I really don't know that well. So here is your task. You're going to mix and match beyond your home team. You want to be able to, this is one of our networking moments, get out, get other perspectives from other schools, other districts, other roles, and just make sure, and there's 2 requests here, just make sure your name is going in the same slot. It seems obvious, but once in a while I don't say that clearly. So if I'm going to come to Lance, I'm going to say, Lance, will you be my laptop partner? He says, of course. I make sure he writes Bruce in that slot, and he watches me write Lance in that same slot. Don't get creative. Okay? Now, the other request is please dial up the task focus and minimize the social focus, other than getting names and memorizing faces. As soon as you have 3 partners, please surf back to your seat and sit down so people know who's still in the game. I'm thinking 2 to 3 minutes, we should be able to handle this. Thank you. So here's where we're headed with this. Hang loose, we'll get there in a minute. Twin goals. Going to link this, may be obvious, but there's no page yet, don't worry, there's a confuser page, but we're not going there. I'm going to name this as this: task focus. Every task, if we have a leadership mind here and a group development mind, is an opportunity to enhance social capital. Schools that make progress design for both of those simultaneously. If we only work on the work, we don't get better at doing the work. So it's the capacity building nature of this. Now here is the challenge. And you have seen this undoubtedly. I see groups regularly who have the task that's bigger than their collaborative social skills to manage the task. If you've ever tried to run the report card committee, you've seen we don't have enough social capital. Groups that are trying to build common formative assessments or deal with SLOs that don't know how to talk, how to listen. So part of the designer's mind is the bite size of the task and the need to structure. So because that's what's in the learning zone. So how do we match two things? Task with structure so we can get inside that yellow space. Lovely example, I've seen teachers think they're going to build good cooperative learning models with kids who don't know how to work in pairs, but they put them in groups of 4 and 5 and 6. Hello. Or as a kindergarten teacher said to me one spring, today, groups of 1. Got no tools. So how do we build enough structure so we can manage the task, but also how do you scaffold the task so it's a manageable task for people? Otherwise, the lack of social capacity overwhelms, so the work gets done not by the group, but by whoever got stuck with it, and we don't own it, or the work devolves to lower common denominator product or process as well. So that's essentially the design here for today. Now, here is where you're going to go. Kind of get you in the room with a partner. Turn to the page you see on the screen. And we have a lovely 2-page spread there, laid out quite nicely. Thank you, whoever managed the printing, for figuring that out. The name is implied, intervention. This is a tool that you can modify. I'll talk about modifications. The topic right there is this, your setting. And please define your setting the way you need to define it. Whether you're a central office person working with a leadership team, a principal with teacher leaders, a teacher working with a team, however you want to perceive that. So given that, I'm going to offer some basically labels in the circle and for a category. So rather than expand one category, do it in layers. So, I think you can respond. What are your hopes for developing social capital or enhancing or increasing it? Got to be real. And the challenges can be things I've said, time, space, energy, whatever. Successes, and we're going to hear about some of those after break. And finally, what's the topic focus? So what are some opportunities you have right in front of you to think about a little differently, to think about as opportunities to get work done and build social capital? So your task now is to develop examples, and because it is a Venn, in a moment you're going to join one of your partners to share and compare. So probably about this many minutes for your own personal work, then I'll cue the transition. And my assumption is at the next step, additional ideas will be constructed, and that certainly is why you have the next page. In just a moment, you will be joining one of your partners, and when you join the partner, obviously the goal is share. You don't need to rewrite your stuff. The place to rewrite is to notice what's common. And your commonality may not be literal, may be categorical. You just notice what's there. Across, who knows how diverse your settings might be. So looking to the upper left there, please find that partner. And again, if you can't find your partner speedily, head up here and we'll do some matchmaking. for next step, which is a two-parter. Number one, when I'm done talking, it's one of those teacher things, when I'm done talking, you're going to say a fond farewell and a thank you to your partner. And number two, you're going to return to your home base and share what you found. You're out prospecting. So what might be some generalizations? You've got a pretty good sampling of the room given the partnership. So do the first thing. And now do the second thing. For kind of the macro, if some of you will be kind enough on the way to a break, if you'll post some of your generalizations, big ideas today's meet, we have a way to sample the room rather than reporting out now. How many, just a quick survey, on the challenge spot, how many of you had time on the challenge? Yeah. And also might check, how many of you had people who don't want to play nice? Or some version of that, Yeah, just checking. I want to name a couple of bits here. Number one, time in itself is irrelevant if people don't have tools. So the question is, a deeper question is, how would you create the need for time? So it's an interesting dance. Some people want to have time. At the schools I mentioned earlier, teachers are asking for the time. So it's an easy sell. I don't have to go to, otherwise you're not trying to sell that concept to teachers. What? More time to work with the people I don't like? How is this a payoff? Or who don't know how to behave? Yeah. And the data's incredibly clear. Fred Newman and his colleagues in Wisconsin, a book called Authentic Achievement, did some work. It said the higher the norms of autonomy and isolation, the less the school can improve, because his research has data bounce off the culture. Can't make use of data, whether that's anecdotal, quantitative, good qualitative. If we don't know what to do with it, don't know how to talk about it, can't make meaning, then we can't do anything. So we end up with those schools is kids aren't learning, so we slap a remedial program on, as opposed to kids are struggling, what in core instruction is producing the struggle. We have to have, that's a much tougher conversation, but the more essential conversation. It's the pattern finding conversation. Now, so if some of your generalizations post up, then here's where we're headed. We're headed to a break. You're going to come back and forget that time. I just it didn't change that. Come back at 10:40. And when you come back, we're going to meet some people who are in the room and have a different kind of conversation for a little bit. One of the great flavors of working with Learning Forward, to talk to some teacher leaders and a principal who have been working on the work for a while and hear some of their story. So that'll happen then, and then a little tool burst. I'm going to move after that to, before lunch, to a chunk on what does it mean to develop a community of thought? What's the work say and how do you do it? And we'll open that door. So at 10:40, see you back here.
Good morning. Denver South High School is one of the several comprehensive high schools that we have in Denver. We have about 1,400 students, and we're located in the Washington Park neighborhood, right across the highway from University of Denver. Many of you know that area. Our 1,400 students are coming from our neighborhood, which is pretty affluent, middle class. And then we are also the magnet in Denver for students who are learning English that speak a language other than Spanish. And while we have a lot of Spanish speakers, our kids come from all over the world and speak over 50 different languages and come from over 70 different countries. And so because of that diversity, both culturally, socioeconomically, linguistically, there are no cliques at our school. And everybody feels safe and comfortable in our school because of that rich diversity. One of our challenges, though, as in many schools, is meeting the needs of such a very diverse population. And we're fortunate because of that ELA program, all of our teachers are required to have training in working with second language learners. And so because of that, we have great expertise in our building. And recognized very early on, this is my 4th year as principal at the school, and I knew that I could not take charge of doing everything at the school by myself when I came in, that I needed to rely on the expertise of the many individuals in there to take our practice forward. And prior to me coming in, there was some mistrust with the administration, the previous administration, and the school was on a downward spiral academically. And so coming in, knowing that I wanted to build up teacher leadership, but also knowing that there wasn't the trust there, that it would take time. And so we're in, I guess, the 2nd year of our teacher leadership model that has expanded this 2nd year, and we're very excited to talk with you about that today. With me is Natalie Blake, who is one of our teacher leaders, our lead teacher leader. She is our English department chair, and our district has applied for a federal grant, the Teacher Incentive Fund, and through that, we have been able to get funding to develop teacher leadership. Natalie is a part of that program. She teaches 3 classes and then has 4 periods that she works coaching and leading our other teacher leaders. And then Lance is our arts department chair, which is both visual and performing arts, and he is not part of the grant teacher leadership, where they are observing teachers and performing part of the evaluation. He is a teacher leader that does coaching. He's not doing part of the evaluation. And he teaches 4 periods in the 7-period day, and so has some time to do some cognitive coaching. So that's a little bit about who we are. So thank you.
Wow. Well, to begin then, and I'm going to pose questions to essentially the group, and we'll just informally figure out who gets the mic for different answers here. What are some things you're learning and are continuing to learn about developing collaborative capacities in a high school?
So when we start, I'm glad I'm not speaking, and last November, we have a year and a half of rolling this out, cognitive coaching and working on our communication skills. So last November, the snapshot would have been, we would have been kind of upset because we didn't think we had enough time to do any of this. That might have been our tipping point moment. Anger. As everybody felt overwhelmed, but as we started to have the conversations with teachers and other people and coach them, we found the real meaning, and people are willing to make a little more room in their day if the experience you have is meaningful. And so then we started getting some reinforcement for our work.
So I think we've learned that it's really challenging. It's hard work building collaboration in the building, but it's so meaningful and powerful. And when you do it intentionally and well, it shifts the conversations that are happening in the building. So we've seen teachers shift from talking about things that they can't control to things that they can control, and how do we change, how do we impact our students. So I think it's been challenging, but so worthwhile.
So in all of that, if you were saying to someone, here's what you need to do more of and less of in the first couple of years, what might be some more ofs and less ofs? And that's from any role.
Well, I think the first thing is creating a structure or a system where this can work. And it was building a master schedule where they're free and have a common planning time as teacher leaders. And then listening and not directing, but taking in all of the great expertise and then coming up with a plan on how to move forward. Certainly having a vision as a leader, but then opening it up to involve all of the people who are going to be participating in the development of the plan.
microphone negotiation. So one thing we noticed too is if you have time together, we want to step outside of the survival mode where we're thinking about just the next thing to do that keeps me functioning in a building. And when you ask people to reflect a week ago or on a 6 weeks or semester or to look forward, you're talking about time in a different scale, you know, not just surviving and getting the copies off the machine, but like, you know, what is not working and what's working, and, you know, what do you give high fives about, you know, like when you finally hit something really cool in a lesson plan where you get kids to write better.
I think more intentional planning all the time, the more, and we kind of shifted a little bit the way we do professional development for our school. And this year, I think we've been really thoughtful and intentional in planning that, and also reflecting on it. And I think it's shifting the usefulness of that and really making the most of our time for professional development. So being intentional, being thoughtful.
So in many ways, you're describing almost a value belief on top of the behaviors. What's your sense then of what other teachers might say if I randomly wandered down the hall? What's going on at South right now?
What is going on at South right now? I'm wondering that myself. Got an email that the heat was off. The new boiler's not working. Oh, well. We're toasty here. You know, one thing that we were very thoughtful about this year, we shifted some funding and added, with some people transitioning out, added 35 new staff members this year. And that was huge. And how do you welcome that many people new to the building, not necessarily new to teaching, but new to the building, and get them up to speed quickly? And it was our teacher leaders working together to figure out how we're going to welcome them, how we're going to get them into the systems, the structures. And part of what we decided is that every new teacher would get coached. And so that is, have a teacher leader working with them. And so that is the culture that they know, and what we do at South. And we also have veteran teachers that signed up for this because we have about 15. Everybody does not receive a one-on-one coach. It's probably about half of our staff that is getting coached. And, but the new folks, this is just what we do. And I think if you were to walk down the hall, you would, people who know it, but there's some people who go, well, what's that? I don't know what's going on. And then there's people who have had the experience with a coach, and it has made an impact on their instruction every day.
So you're describing the one-to-one work that teacher leaders might be doing. What are you noticing in the shifting groups from over the 4 years? If I watch a group of teachers at South engage, how would you comment and say, wow, that didn't happen 2 years ago. That makes my heart soar, or our work is paying off?
So we have common planning 3 times a week at South, and I think if you were to compare how that works now as to previously, I think we really have structures in place that are making teachers work together to analyze student work, and then way more focused on what are those causes when students aren't doing well. How can we change our instruction to better serve our students and to help all of our students succeed? So I think those conversations are more focused on student work and looking at those root causes. I think in addition to that 3 times a week formal common planning, I work in an office in the building, and there's consistently teachers coming in and out, and ironically, maybe not ironically, but they're having those conversations you talked about earlier, where it's like, man, my lesson was great today, and they're all like, really, what'd you do? Can you share that? Will you email that? And then there's days when they come in and they're like, this didn't work. What do you do? And so I think shifting that to a community, working all together to support our kids.
I think one thing that I've seen, the staff has always been very supportive of one another and very caring about our students and recognizing that there are significant needs. But the conversations have not been about instruction and what's going on day to day. And yes, that office is like the hub in the building where people just come in on a planning period and start sharing what's going on. And it's very exciting.
So with this consistent and sustainable work you've done, what's next? What's the next stretch goal? Or what might they be?
Well, we joke that everybody's going to be a teacher leader, and we'll just have these different tiers, of just getting, you're the expert in this, we want you to share that expertise. And we kind of joke about that. I mean, we recognize that there are definite strengths that everyone has, and some are more ready to take on more of a leadership type role, but there's definitely the interest in keeping folks in the classroom as long as they want to be teaching in the classroom, so that they don't lose that connection and just the voice. You know, I'm in their shoes. I know what's going on, and I think that's really important and has made them be very quickly accepted by our teachers. What would you like to see, Lance?
If you're starting the process and you have a hard culture to change, I think it's not bad to go with first the people you're comfortable with and you trust, and then have some high success. So somebody you already collaborate with and work with. And then over time, after that success, I think it'll fuel you to talk to somebody else. So I went to talk to the music teacher who's like a auditory genius and famous jazz guy and all this other stuff. And I'm the visual arts teacher, right? So I was worried about that gap where I don't know what he knows and he's way smart. And so, but I could help him with, instruction and posters. And he leaned over and he said, "Hey, I don't even have art in my house. How do I make a poster?" And then, this year he was evaluated again, and he got much better scores. He's using the overhead. He's team teaching a little bit. He's got someone sharing the room. He's in dialogue with them. He's in dialogue with me. He was really happy to work with Chris Ann. Chris Ann gave me the reinforcement that we're doing the right thing here. And then other times you'll find responsibility by accident. Like one time I was in a meeting with Dr. Waters and I said, "We're not asking the right questions. We're always telling teachers what to do. We're not saying, how do you want to be or who do you want to be? Like those kinds of questions." And she said, "That's a great question. I think you want to run a staff development?" I'm like, but we did, and we tried to walk across the room and tell other teachers who we're grateful for or what qualities they have that we would like to emulate, that, they're kind of like hopeful or really helpful. We just wanted to express a little gratitude. So that can work too.
So you're describing ultimately an attraction model. What happens when you get to the limits of attraction? What's your thinking about that?
Well, in sharing, I think you can start with what people's strengths are. And then if you have trust, then you could start talking about what isn't going well. And I think that'll be the next stage for us. Like what is not going well in our teaching, or which populations aren't we reaching? And so, but if you have foundation of, by the way, I'm good at this, then, people are willing to then risk, this isn't going so well, In art, it's like a criticism sandwich. Like you say something really good and you tell them what they need to work on, and then you finish up with something good. And the meat's in the middle.
Some people may miss
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that we have found at our school is different departments are further along, and some are just getting into this. And our English department has been working together collaboratively with some structures a little bit longer. And so they are pushing each other more, and what that does is they're kind of at the forefront. And our math department is further behind. And so knowing what we should expect and where we can push, we're getting there. And it's been 4 years. The first year that I was there, it was setting up the master schedule to work. And teacher leaders had this common planning time. Whoa, what do we do with this period off? Well, let's start getting into classrooms and talking to each other. So it takes time, but I think because we haven't rushed in, because we haven't forced, it's evolving and becoming the norm. And there are more challenging conversations that happen with the English teachers than are happening in other content areas right now.
So it's almost like you've got a developmental model for what a group does with a parallel developmental model for what a teacher-leader does. The question is, for teacher leaders in departments that are as far along, how cognizant are they about that developmental map?
I would say that they see that. Now, where they need to go, I'm not sure that they know enough about that, and maybe you could talk about that.
So I think we have a community of practice meeting every few months with Chris Ann and Sue. And they're helping the teacher leaders learn to coach and also learn to lead their teams. And in that meeting, we have an opportunity to share kind of what we're doing and maybe some problems of practice as leaders. And then I worked with the math department in developing SLOs and kind of went in and helped them. But I think as a school, maybe that's where we could work more in helping our leaders talk about what they're doing and then spreading practices that are working in one department with other departments, or, you know, working more across departments, which I think is something that's coming out of what we're doing anyway. Like I'm making way more connections with people in other departments than I had before, but maybe some more formal structures to help us do that would help other departments move along.
Yeah. So in some ways, a more explicit configuration map. Here's a development, you're at this stage, there's a stage theory here. And I suspect groups don't know what they don't know about being a group. Couple more. Let's imagine a world in which you're saying, I'm going to go find the world's greatest teacher leaders. What's the baseline skill set, dispositional set that's in the filter? And you might be able to, I'm sure you all can contribute to say, here's what you got to walk in with as the platform for learning how to do this.
Teachers are paid to stand in front of people and deliver information, so that's what we get good at over time. And I think teachers can be reminded of putting on the brakes and then really being people who listen. You know, like we sit down, we don't have to produce anything and we have to listen, and that's really uncomfortable for a little while. But it becomes easier over time because you'll find something that'll improve your practice or inspire you. And also reflecting. The day is so hectic that if you don't build time to think about how things are actually going in amazing ways and how things are disastrous, like, you know, like just look at it, then you're just always running to do the next thing 45 minutes away.
What I would look for in continuing to develop or grow our teacher leadership is definitely interest, content knowledge, a willingness to learn and reflect and to listen, and giving somebody an opportunity. You know, recognizing there's something there, I don't know quite what it is, and that was with Natalie. Recognizing in her that she, wow, you know, after, 3-4 years of teaching, she's got it. And I don't know what it is, but I'm going to push her. I'm going to give her the opportunity to step up. And that's been 3 years now. And mentored and supported her with a couple of other veteran teachers. But then now she's leading. And so it's, you know, watching for it, whatever it is. And I think we know what that is. It's the confidence, it's the expertise, it's the willingness to work with one another and recognize that you don't know all the answers, but you're willing to learn. And then pushing somebody and developing them along the way. Sorry for the emotion.
So it's funny that Dr. Waters said that because I was thinking the same thing. I would have never thought that I would be leading anything other than perhaps in my classroom. And so the fact that she believed in me has been so empowering, and the skills that I've learned along the way and my own growth has been, I think, amazing. And to give that opportunity to teachers, I think teachers have seen that she's given that to me, and then what that does is it spreads incredible trust through the building by empowering teachers. So I've just been thankful to have that opportunity. I think the one skill that has benefited me the most as a teacher leader is always assuming positive intentions. I think we're working kind of as a go-between sometimes, between admin and between teachers, and just always assuming that people have those positive intentions, I think has allowed me to build trust within the buildings.
So in many ways, you're describing a counter-cultural set of values here, which is credibility comes from my content knowledge in the secondary school. And you're proposing that there's credibility that comes from process knowledge and the process tools. So the question is, how do we I think the driving question is, how do you make that as valued as knowing your stuff as well? You can ask table groups now to take a minute and talk together about what you've heard here. What might be your takeaways from this conversation? And then when you get some ideas, then let's post up as well so we can capture some of it and collect some of the thinking here. Will you join me in thanking these folks for talking up here? Thank you. If you haven't done so, if someone's on line 2, coalescing your thoughts into the today's meet is quite useful. I've been peeking at lunch. I'm going to peek over and take a look at what's there as well. It's a useful thread. I'm actually interested in that, particularly given the topic is social capital. Social media is part of that. So how do we reach out and learn together and learn from one another? And I suspect the South people would be intrigued by what you're noticing and thinking. I'm going to do a burst here between now and lunch, the next 27 minutes, on this topic, because it really is the transition. What does it mean then, in the context of collaboration, social capital, what does it mean to be a community of thought? Because what you just heard is people building communities of thought. A very different kind of idea. And so what we get is these kinds of questions in this little segment. So this will organize the wrap around to lunch, and we'll get into the follow. Why does it matter? The interdependence of thought. What makes that very high quality? And again, literature is pretty clear on that. How do we develop it? And then how do you sustain it? How do you sustain it? That's a very critical issue in this work. Because with no disrespect, what they're describing is still pretty fragile. It could go away. Now, given all that, here is this notion then. It's kind of some language. I'm moving these so I don't do something wonderfully graceful and fall over a chair. 3 words that are very linked to this notion. And these all have the same root. Community, common, and communicate. We become a community by what we hold in common. And what we hold in common is developed through how and what we communicate about. Ultimately, there's a very simple notion here. What do you talk about, and how do you talk about it? Parallel, by the way, there's a hidden question in that. What don't you talk about? Yeah. There's an organizational developer named Chris Argris, and it's his big question. What don't you talk about around here, and why don't you talk about it? High isolation schools, you don't talk about practice. Or, I was talking to as a K-6 school 6th grade teacher one day in a coaching conversation, and she was doing very rich problem solving kind of tasks, but she had this cluster of turned out boys who didn't have fundamental math skills. So I said, so how often that's happened? She said, oh, every year there's a cluster of kids that get to me without good arithmetic skills. And I innocently say, so when you talk with the 5th grade and 4th grade, she said, stop right there. I can't talk to 5th grade and 4th grade about that. They'll think I'm criticizing them. Ba-boom. That's a stuck school where a teacher feels like she can't name what should be obvious. Something ain't working here. There's a pattern. There's a pattern. So, common, communicate. Now, the commons, very old concept. If you look upper left, the village commons of yore. Villages had a common, it was common grazing. In fact, if you've ever been to Boston and wrapped around the Boston Commons, to some degree it's not the same way because Boston Commons was grazing ground. Central Park serves as a commons. Any major city has a commons. But we have kind of what we're talking about in this work is an intellectual and emotional commons that you can draw from. It's a shared resource. It's a shared resource. So how do we get it? We get through experimentation, through problem solving, through sharing practice. We create and nurture the commons. But that means to do that, you've got to contribute. So you can't just take out. You've got to put in. And so that means, notice that, another form of common, a common fund. In our work, it's a common fund of ideas. It's willing to experiment. And that's real different than I share stories. We storytell in meetings. And it means, there's the Latin. To bring together, to collect, to unite. Contribution, contribution. So it's an interesting question. And you know, in your world, who contributes? Who are the givers? Who are the givers? So there's individuals, and then there's co-construction, co-creation in this work. Now here is the challenge. And it came up, I think it came out of Lance's mouth, the need to listen. Well, here's the hardest part of work in organizations today. You got to be present. You got to be in the room. You got a pen in your hand, write down this word. Just jot it down. Because that's what being present means. Got to be here. And because there's only one consonant away, there's danger. We are a distracted species. And there are, I'm going to name, there's an emotional here and there. The furnace isn't working. Ah! And boom, I'm out of the room emotionally. We're asking people to be in groups in a disciplined way. I have to set aside some things. Thinking about kids, my own, others, projects. So I'm planning lessons, planning grocery lists, right? Right? Thinking about, well, here's the reality, right? Because now we have this too. Quick survey. How many of you expect to receive or send a text or voicemail before the end of the day? Just be clear. Right? Right? How many of you are planning, have engaged in, or will plan to at lunch do business with people in the room here? You're from your district? Yeah, we're going to talk about, right? Got that rolling? And how many of you have planned an errand for the way home? You're thinking, okay, I'm here, I'm going across town, I got to stop off. Notice that's all in your head. That's all in your head. Yeah. Now, being present requires focus, attention, and, as I said before, discipline. Take a moment, scrap of paper, there's some Post-it notes, and do this. Do a quick stem here. And I'm going to do 2 quick surveys here, and then a little survey I've been modifying. On your stem, finish this. Just, this is not meant to be a thesis, but just kind of finish the thought. How do you know you're being a good listener? And that could be one-on-one or teamwork. So just, how do you know? And it says index cards, but whatever you got there, it will work. Some of you know way too much about this if you're still writing. Right? And now, here, let's just check. Round robin. So, and again, round robin means no crosstalk. Just share in turn. I know I'm being, when I do this, see this, feel this, whatever you said. So just tout le long, all around. To this. Got to be real. Next stem. How do you know when you're not that good person? So again, finish the stem. And I suspect it's more than just the opposite of what you said the first time. There's some other indicators. How do you know? I want to name, and then I'm going to take you to one more resource. That in all of this work on collaboration, capital development, building community, it's all built on listening, not on talking. So we have this really distorted notion in Western culture. Indigenous cultures are not confused about this in the least, that people who are talking are contributing. But some of the biggest contributors are people who are listening and help other people listen. That's why any of you who have worked on, for example, being able to paraphrase know that you can't paraphrase if you're not listening. I've seen people be incredible value-added group members who essentially listen and paraphrase. They don't toss things out. What you'll discover sometimes with some serious tongue biting is that important thing you thought you had to say. If you wait long enough, someone else is going to say it. I was once mentoring a principal who was concerned about one of her primary teams not being very creative. So I shadowed her for a while, sat in some meetings. At the end, I said, "So, Grace, this team you're concerned about?" She said, "Yeah, they only had like, 7, 8, 9 ideas today." I said, "Yeah, and 6 of them came out of your mouth." And we wonder why there was no space to be creative when she's in the room. So in that case, the data was persuasive. I didn't quite say it that way, but I was a little more graceful about that. So how do we be present with our colleagues? And I would suggest that that's a leadership skill. Because if you're not willing to be present, why should anyone else be present? Here is a little thing I'm working on. I keep tweaking this. Go to this page, and you'll see where I found it. I was roaming around last year looking at, it's been a couple of days looking at the research on listening, and I stumbled onto this guy's work. He's a fire chief in Utah, and he was working on, I think, some master's work on leadership. He had framed it as yes, no, so I actually modified the questions to make them scalable. There is I found later there is a typo. You'll find the typo. Bonus points. If you can't find the typo, see me later for visual. Now, take a moment, and here's how to do surveys like this. Don't obsess. Just read it, pick a number. And again, we're not going to do a master collection of this, so it's not going up on like SurveyMonkey or anything. I'm offering this as a tool just to get a sense of what's the layers beneath. And so have a sense, and then after you've finished, your neighbors have finished, just then take a moment and what are you noticing here? I also did this one early iteration. I happened to be a principal and a vice principal I knew, and they swapped and did each other to see how accurate they were. And that's the come to Jesus moment. Yeah, And if you're really brave, have your spouse or your loved ones do it as well. So, right? All right, so just a little test there. Find out who your friends are real fast around here, don't you? Yeah. Here is the issue. Productive groups and productive group leaders and productive teacher leaders and building leaders listen differently than lower productive leaders. What goes on in your head affects the relationship. And here's the dilemma. The way you listen has gotten you where you are. It may not get you where you want to be. For example, those of you who have that problem-solving solution brain, as my business partner Laura Lipton says, take my advice, I'm not using it. Solution brain means I'm actually not listening to you, whether I'm facilitating or coaching. Because what I'm listening to is everything I know about what I think your problem is. I'm not listening to how you think, what you think. See, the real issue is I need to figure out what you think the problem is, not what I think it is. The other piece that's here is that we have to break the pattern of storytelling in group work. Because it's just that mindless storytelling just sucks the life and the time. We never have enough time. Well, you used up half of it telling stories. Go have a beer after school, not here. And that's a pattern to really pay attention to. That's why I think the power of tools like this is not the tool, it's the conversation. Any like learning styles inventories makes that real. Well, here is just a little bit of data burst and then a lunch burst. Listening. Because we have lovely recording devices now and measurement devices, we can find out the difference between speaking rates and listening rates. Pretty hot stuff, and I was just looking at some supporting material right now that gets this from the work. They have competitions for court reporters. So we can really find out how fast people can really listen and record if you're a court reporter. Well, that's the typical rate of human conversation. People can talk faster than that. And on American television, I have to say that because no other country allows this, check out the pharmaceutical ads. And listen to the end of the ad when they do the disclaimers. They're going a lot faster than that. And they often notice, you'll become a connoisseur of this stuff, because they switch narrators usually. They put it in a different voice. Yes, if you take this drug, your hair will fall off, your dog will die, your last kid will turn into a monkey, but don't worry, right? But they're saying that really fast. We can still track that. Now, they've tested this in a couple of ways. In fact, here's the issue. We can listen up to that rate. Yeah. In university settings, students can note take up to 350 words a minute. Can't process it, but they can scribe it. The best court reporters can go 350 to 400 with accuracy. So when they have competitions for court reporters, the one test is for accuracy, the other test is for all-out bloody speed with a higher degree of margin. The all-out bloody speed is like 500 words a minute. But you notice math people do the ratio, 150 to 5 or 180, right? It's 1-to-4 ratio. We got a lot of time in our head, and we fill it. So notice biologically, physiologically, why we do those things. So it's managing biology, essentially. Again, the way we listen has a biological component, but it has a huge cultural component. If you're ever around native people, you'll notice they don't listen the same way. They don't jump in. My brother-in-law is a Maori elder from New Zealand. And Raymond, there will be endless silences when you talk to Raymond. When he's visiting family, one day my wife was talking to him on the phone, and he was in New Zealand, and I'm thinking, I don't think anyone's talking here, and this is a really expensive phone call. But as far as Raymond was concerned, it was a deep communication, because Leslie, my wife, had said something he wanted to think about. Until he's thought about it fully, he doesn't respond. Why would I? It's about you, so I need to respect what you just said. What a radical idea. Now, and I'm going to close out with this and then turn the mic. Because if you're famous, they put your picture and your name above, but look at the title of this memoir. Now ask yourself in the next meeting you're in, does a noise in my head bother you? Because it is the noise in our head that may be getting in the way of all of this work. So how do we still the chatter? Well, where we're headed after lunch is into some work on essentially what might beyond listening get in the way. What are some of the constraints and the blocks? And then given those as natural sociological, biological bits, how do we address that? And then so you'll mix and match. We'll get into some tools, again, some teamwork, and then some partner work as well throughout the afternoon.
As you can see, I work with the most amazing team of people in Woodland Park. This has been an incredible day because what was said today, this morning, the focus, the interesting thing when we came up, didn't realize the magnitude that adaptive schools is where we've embedded all of what we've done in Woodland Park. It was our foundation of what we started. And I've had an incredible journey as an educator. I came into the profession and immediately connected with middle school. Middle school because of the kids, because they're challenging and they're fun and they're amazing and they're intriguing, but also middle school because it's always been the place where the teams were. So I immediately found that 25 years ago that the teams were in middle school. And so I spent 20 years in middle school in a team, and I found a place with interdisciplinary teams and department teams that just fostered me professionally and helped me grow. And as was said today, standing on the shoulders of giants, like working with people that bring you as a brand new teacher into the profession and make you amazing right away because they share and they collaborate. And as an administrator, that's been the core of where I'm at, is that it's about the team, it's about collaboration, it's about everything we've talked about today. And I've tried to do that as a leader in our buildings and tried to find the voice in the staff and really found, discovering that I didn't have to know the answers. I just had to ask really good questions. And we've been intrigued today to watch the questions that are asked by Bruce and how he uses the cognitive coaching, the adaptive schools, to really paraphrase and connect with people and pull that amazing stuff out of educators that, as you can see, all of those, and they touched on people that have come and gone in Woodland Park. It's just amazing. So I can't leave today without recognizing my team. So if the team will stand up that came up here, I have an amazing team that came up. From both Woodland Park Middle School and the district office, and together we've gone through a lifetime. We've grappled with issues, we've challenged each other, we've been there for each other, we've supported each other, we've grown together, and they continue all the time to help me learn and grow professionally. And that's why I choose to be at the district I'm at. You get to be a jack of all trades in a small district, but we work together and do amazing things. And so I'm thankful to them. I'm thankful to Learning Forward for the amazing work here. I'm thankful, actually, one of the first trainings I participated in at Woodland Park was sponsored by Bill and Ann O'Rourke. And so to see the amazing work that they did as a young educator, and they showed all the things we've talked about today. So they were able to pull that out of people and get them to connect with where they are. So I thank everyone for that, and on behalf of my team, I'm honored with the recognition. So thank you.
Michelle Bourgeois, a former O'Rourke Prize winner, is also with us today. So wanted to let you know that. Please be thinking about whom you might nominate for next year's O'Rourke Prize. The information of the process is on our website. Let's continue the learning.
Because this will pick right up when we talked about listening. So you may recognize this meeting, right? Broncos fan, obviously, right? Thank you. You go the opposite way. And as you know, Calvin's alter ego has the wisdom in the pair, and he says, but metaphors are so powerful, you don't give it up. So Calvin says, yeah. So we're trying to interrupt some patterns here. And so where we're headed in this next bit, kind of in that, how do we get collaborations, community, and what might get in the way. The patterns will continue. I'm going to do a burst and give you a chance to talk to neighbors in just a minute. And then we have several paired, or you're going to pair and get a group of 4 for some stuff later this afternoon as well. And we'll finish up probably around 3:45-ish, but 3:30-ish, you'll head back to home-based groups to close up. So trust that you'll be with your home team again. So here is some of the issues in this work. I'm going to go right here. There's some serious challenges. And it's the ones we have to individually navigate and appreciate that your colleagues are navigating these challenges too. Real simple. I might not know. And so am I psychologically safe enough to reveal that to my peers? Can I bring my not knowing to the table? Or is that just too scary? Part of it too is an identity issue. And you notice it's the issue for both teacher leaders and building leaders. Is it okay not to know? The best say, I don't know, let's figure it out. Or we collectively don't yet have the resources to figure it out. We need to reach out. But again, that's a personal dilemma. For some people, this is scary. People who don't appreciate, and we're talking about collective thought here, they don't yet trust or appreciate the process of thinking together. And people thinking that I have to do this in front of other people or for other people, not with other people. Is it okay to be wrong? So one of the pieces that is almost dispositional in effective group work is to notice that I have ideas, I am not my ideas. So notice it's that ego detachment. Healthy groups operate with a very interesting premise, and it develops over time, which is once an idea is on the table, it belongs to the group to mess with. It's an idea. Let's just toss them out there. So if you don't like it, you don't like me, we can talk about the idea, not each other. And then the J word. Right? Wow. So it's that fear of judgment. Now there's a deeper structure here that it does to some degree explain all this. It's a chap named Irving Janis. You know his work, some of you, he coined the term groupthink. That's what he's best known for. That was that famous study in the 70s. They were looking at things like the Kennedy brothers and the Bay of Pigs and studying all how the Kennedy brothers essentially interrupted groupthink that was about to destroy the world. But Janis also has done work on the constraints within decision-making groups. And our adaptation saying that there are constraints to effective dialogue, constraints to discussion, and ultimately constraints, things that get in the way. So I'm going to give you some content, then have you talk about this. How does this play out for you? One is affiliative. The affiliative constraint is gigantic in schools, more so than any other organizations I tend to work with. It means I'm afraid I'll get voted off the island. And when it operates, I don't particularly like Joe's idea, but if I question his idea, he may think I'm challenging him, so he won't like me. It's going to cause tension, social tension. So I don't inquire about things that I should be inquiring about just because I don't want to offend people. It's an affiliation issue. Is one, now people who get this, one history teacher working years ago with, he said, I don't mind starting a fight with my team. He said, but only if there's enough time to finish it. If I start it 10 minutes before the meeting's over, that's not fair. It's going to just fester. So I've learned to pick my spots because he understands that that operates for people. So it's toxic if we have that. So you start to get what is ultimately the shadow side of collaborative groups. And there's a shadow side to collaborative groups. That's part of the shadow right there. We only talk about the nice stuff. We don't talk about the unpleasant stuff. That's coupled with this. Cognitive constraints means we don't have tools. And again, I use the phrase self-sealing logic. If we only know what we know and only talk about what we know, we get stuck. So cognitive constraints can be we don't have the knowledge. An example, I watched a group, I do a lot of work in Canada, British Columbia, and they named it as a 2-year exploratory dialogue, no decision, on the topic of standards-based grading. Because they knew they didn't know. And they also knew that people are going to have to confront a lot of practices that the research says are really toxic and harmful for kids, like the no zeros conversation. Because they understood cognitive constraints, they developed a rich repertoire of protocols for working with text-based material so they could get ideas on the table safely and scaffold. And that's what scaffolds, or the fancy word is heuristics, are for. You need tools. See, groups need tools as much as individuals. An example, my friend David Hirely, some of you know his work on thinking maps. When schools use thinking maps, both for classroom practice and adult practice, they have external vehicles for talking. You can externalize your thought process to get out of those cognitive constraints. And then finally, ego. Now, that fires in 2 different ways. One, people who think they're the smartest person in the room and are willing to share that. Another form, an interesting form of ego constraint, and again, Janice has seen this in lots of groups, is people who don't trust the process of group thought. And so it's self-protective. It's an interesting piece. It manifests in funny ways, but underneath it is I don't trust others. It's a trust thing, but it's a trust in the process as well as anything. So I want to name that these are 3 really real things. There's a giant research base inside schools, outside schools on this. So just notice, by the way, why I'm doing this is a preface for why do groups need structure. Why do they need protocols? Why, by the way, do groups need facilitation? You got more than 4 people in the room, you need a facilitator. And sometimes 4 people need it to take turns. But these things are what are the deep structure. So take a minute now and do this, please, within your neighbor. So just as small a conversation as you can have. So just pairs are ideal if you end up with 1 trio, but don't go beyond that. And so just talk, and then I'll chime in about 6 minutes to bring you back. So you will have a nice bit for a conversation there. Thank you. This little segment I'm doing here is to suggest that beneath the surface of what sometimes may be off-putting or distracting behaviors are some real things going on. We have to remember that collaborative work was invented by extroverts for extroverts. We have to appreciate that for some of our colleagues, it's really draining to work with other people. Susan Cain's book, that wonderful book called Quiet, is, I think, really powerful to get inside what that must mean. Hence, the committee of the whole, how exhausting. Now, you find the true extroverts in your group because they go, yippee, team time, all right. And they are actually more energized at the end than they were at the beginning. But these are also real. They're underneath, and there's some patterns here. Now, this is the other piece that's real. I'm going to come into it with this territory. Ancient times, guidance counselors, work was easier. There were basically 2 curriculum strands. Those are your choices. Those are your choices. Right? Well, what that actually means is this. We've got some pretty old technology in our skulls. Best data I've seen says about 100,000-year-old brains. And that means something would resemble a modern brain. A brain, for example, that could deal with symbolic information. There's been some digs, for example, in Ethiopia where they're finding that dated to those kind of eras incised beads. Well, to have an incision in a bead with a pattern means there's symbolic value, and they find those beads across Africa, which means there were trade networks. If you take anthropology, North American anthropology, they trace the flint tools, and they know, for example, the geologists will say that flint came from Arkansas, but it's showing up in Ohio in some of the mounds. So we know that to have shapes, and we start to see similar tool patterns emerge, that there's some kind of thing going on. And the Pleistocene is us. So, for example, our wiring says, now notice a physical environment, I'm going to make the case for that, but a social environment as well. And there's some current anthropology that backs up the social environment challenge. And that challenge is one of the great challenges of schools as organizations. We'll come to that. But notice what we're wired for. We're wired for that. So you've probably never practiced responding to saber-toothed tigers, but you would know exactly what to do. Just get out the door ahead of anyone else, right? And we're good to go. But that fight, flight, freeze is wired into us. We know how to respond. But the problem with the human brain is real danger and perceived danger causes the same physiological response. So we get suppression of thought process, maximum adrenaline focus, and you can test this. Principals, I have a challenge for you. You can test it in your next staff meeting. Run the staff meeting right up to the end of the time you've announced. And watch the younger faculty members who have kids in daycare, particularly the ones with daycare contracts that say you have to pay extra if you're late. And watch what they do. They, I will guarantee you, besides shuffling papers, will start scratching their thighs. Because blood is leaving the brain and going into major muscles so you can run. It's a real-time experiment. Mess with people. You know, that's what you have groups for. You can right? Just test. Maybe about 4:15 I'll try that. Now, here's the issue. There is something in the literature called the Savannah hypothesis. The great biologist E.O. Wilson has written about this. But that's the environment we find pleasing. Right? In all your schools named Prairie View, Mountain View, right? We like the vista because you can see things, danger. In fact, I heard one of the researchers say we are ready for 3 fast decisions. We're in our encampment and a stranger comes over the hill. Run, kill it, or mate with it. Those are the basic fast decisions because we want to be able to see what's coming. And we love relief. Look at playgrounds. All you have to do is take a piece of sewer pipe, throw it on a playground, and the nearest 6-year-old will crawl in the sewer pipe. Why do you buy your kids toys? All you need is a blanket over a table. Whoosh. Right? But that's deep wiring, and you smile because you recognize that. That's part of our wiring. Now, if you notice any park, Olmsted's great genius when he built Central Park and the ribbons and the parks in Boston and the parks in Buffalo is he built savannas. Landscape architecture is basically the design of savannas in our environment. Right? Fancy yards. What do we build? We sculpt them. We put interesting things there. And then water. Now here's the rational thing, right? The view of the ocean or the river costs more than the view of the parking lot, but you're buying a hotel room. It's the same room. We're willing to pay a premium for the view. Why? It's not rational. It's not rational. You can walk out the door and go see the view, but we want to look out our window. Real estate, right? Central Park. You've got the view of Central Park in New York City, you're going to pay a premium for the view. And I'm sure you could look at local real estate markets and get the same thing. Now, from that, that's the physical brain. We also have a social brain. And that social brain is a core capacity. We are wired to pay attention to other people. Here's the challenge. The algebra teachers, Jesse, we can put you on this project right now. Everyone at your table has a relationship with everyone else. But for a team of 4 or 5, we have the ability to not only do that, but we monitor the relationship every other pair has in the room. So you notice we got a lovely little algebraic expression there. We're wired to notice the sociology around us. That's the social brain. It's a great capacity. We are wired to connect. And we have this thing through, some of you have been doing some reading, I think, about mirror neurons. Mirror neurons let us mind read. We can infer intention. And that, again, from close-knit bands of people. And that's why, by the way, this is the subtext of all group work. People have the monitoring system running. That's the auto system underneath the cognitive models you've got running. And we harmonize. We're wired to harmonize our energy. We band together to hunt. We banded together to fight. We banded together to gather food and share food. We harmonize. Those are pretty deep structure, which is why schools are frustrating places if we don't have enough time with the people we, quote, work with. That's what's going on, and that's what people are hungry for. And sometimes that hunger causes some different behaviors. Now, a guy named Robin Dunbar did the math. He's an English sociologist, anthropologist, and it's called Dunbar's number in the literature. And he looked at both chimpanzee populations and Homo sapien, early Homo sapiens. They could manage bands of up to about 80. Chimpanzee populations never get bigger than 80. Our early forebearers had basically tribal groups of about 80. That's all we can truly manage. No one has 4,000 Facebook friends. In humans, it turns out the number expands because the theory behind Dunbar's number is the reason the brain exploded and developed was to manage social mathematics. We got bigger, more complex brains to manage the problem solving of social worlds. And so 150 is Dunbar's number. And they looked back in the 18th century at English villages and got the census data. They max at 150. That's the median number. Get too much bigger, the villages would tend to split. Modern times, Hutterite communities, Hutterites are like Mennonites, Amish, they're the same kind of deep roots. There's Hutterite communities in Montana, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. At 150, they split the community. Now, Deborah Meyer, the great education reformer who started Central Park East and Renaissance School in Boston, said the problem of school size is not number of kids, it's number of adults. She said, you get more than 20 adults in a building, you can't have a conversation. Which would suggest that the faculty is not the unit of learning. It's the team that's the unit of learning. We can manage the team. We can't manage the faculty. That's why, for example, a big school I was working with last week, they get it, that department heads and teams within departments really matter. The principal can lead the leaders, but can't lead the school, ultimately. And why? Because we're wired for that. So we're doing the wiring. We are wired for attunement. Now this couples with the leadership skill of listening. But we have this ability that develops at that age. And attunement is the musical metaphor. You can use this with your guy, by the way. Yeah. It's the idea of harmony. Physics would say it's on the same exact tonal quality there, so we're on the same wavelength is attunement. So if you have any guitar players now with all the digital tuners you clip right on, you hit the string and boom, it tells you below or below and measures right in. But what that means is this: well-attuned parents are creating a neural structure in the infant that says, you have my full attention. And it builds cognitive circuits and it builds emotional circuits that says, I'm safe, you care about me, and I'm in control. The neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, who's done some amazing work, says the way to be the most fascinating person in the room is you basically mirror the infant and mimic him. Whatever they do, you do. And that's what builds that brain. So people know when you're paying. You can't fake attention. And this cuts across culture, ages, and in fact, it can jump a generation. So that actually is a great-grandma and a great-grandchild. We know. In fact, you know enough to know that that's the first focal point for baby's eyes. But people come to your meetings and they know when you're attuned and when you're not. That's the ultimate scan. That's why some people, by the way, are trusted and some are not. That's the ultimate, it's the deepest coaching skill, is attunement. And listening scaffolds off that. But if you're in your own head, then how can you be in my head? And I know when you're not. So it's an interesting piece about collaboration. Am I willing to spend more energy on you than on me? Now, why? That's popping up in science fields. Right now, there's some graduate programs in sciences and engineering that are teaching collaboration. In the sciences now, what's called a home run paper has a huge chance of being a home run paper if it's written by multiple authors. Home run papers are papers cited by more than 100 other authors. So you can pop into Google, the Google Science, and you can look at how many times something's been cited. Well, the seminal papers are written by teams now, not individuals. You probably can notice even with the Nobel Prizes in science and physics and medicine, there's always more than one winner because the work builds on. And it's this intersection where we get great mysteries are solved. And it's partly it's co-creation and it's the interdependence. I'm sorry, I went too fast there. Okay, stutter with a clicker. It's the co-creation that builds ownership. If we build it, we own it. Now, here's the issue, though. You can't sell solutions to people who don't own problems. So what people have to own is the problems or the underlying issues. And we have to co-create understanding of that. We've learned that with all the data work we've done. Data have no meaning. It's constructed. What do these data mean? We construct it together. And hopefully we own the existing story and we can do something about what we own. Now, what that then tells us is this. Some things get in the way. So I'm doing kind of cross research here, pulling some stuff up pretty fast. One is, too big a group, you can't collaborate. That's why I say, yeah, we're a team. There's 27 people meeting today. No, you're not. Again, Dunbar's number, the algebra of groups, which means you get too many people at the table. And sometimes the worst committees I get to facilitate are ones where people are there for political reasons as opposed to real work reasons. So constructing the group, but that also means that the committee of the whole needs to be subdivided for major portions of the work, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. That one's interesting. Diversity means this, and that's not, it can be all the levels of diversity, ethnicity, gender, experience, backstory. But what diversity gets in the way is if I don't know you as deeply as a person, then we're not going to reveal. Which is why people have to get to know one another in order to do the work. And that happens in much smaller units around real work. But large, diverse teams are historically and practically very unproductive teams. And then, of course, virtual gets in the way. And if you, I'll get this to Liz, but there's a good citation, some work out of the Harvard Business Review. I don't know if that's in the subtitle. I think I gave it to you. Yeah, we'll post that up if you want the research on this. And then finally, because virtual groups that are diverse and are large, if you've ever been on any of those big teleconference kind of things, it's just, they're horrible. They're just totally horrible. It's like, give me a break. And then finally, this one's counterintuitive. Now, go back to the ego constraint thing from Janice. A big group of really smart people is a disaster because everybody's an expert. Yeah, if you want to really watch this in action, go visit your local university and watch faculty meeting. They're nightmares. They're nightmares. And they're populated by social liberals who have these social justice agendas, and they don't listen to each other. Yeah, pretty solid, pretty solid. Now, here is the little nuggets on collective intelligence. There's a wonderful book out called Social Physics, a guy named Alex Pentland. He's at MIT, P-E-N-T-L-A-N-D. There's a subset of the famous Media Lab that's looking at this. And what they're studying is, if you work on the lab, you are part of the, we study you as well as what you're working on. It's kind of interesting. And what Pentland's take is that there's many potential sociological breakthroughs that technology can help us with. You can quantify social science beyond a lot of the qualitative work that's been done. So how do you quantify it? So they do two things. They built this set of digital badges that are web-enabled, so everyone at your table. So you're a team that's working, and each of you has the digital badge on. And it records in real time the conversation and the interaction patterns. And what they get is graphs in scatter plots. So John talked, and Lana responded. And then someone else responded, so they can trace the conversation. Now what they're looking at is, given the way this team works, what's the quality of work they're producing? So they're measured in what kind of research papers are they producing? What kind of hot stuff are they putting out in the world that other people are finding value in? So what does this do that produces that? Now here's the parallel. All the work on collective responsibility, collective efficacy, says that how teachers talk affects what happens in the classroom, affects student learning. So strong parallel. Collective intelligence, smarter groups, smarter teaching, smarter learning. Now, so we get this, turn taking. In the groups in which there were no dominators and no speech makers, there was more flow, better work. Surprise, surprise. How do you structure that? You got to structure that. You got to get people off their soapboxes. And you can structure that. You can interrupt those patterns. And the other criteria, and what I love about Alex Pentland, if you look at his book and the papers that are produced, he lets his lead, the postdocs and the doctoral students be the lead authors on the paper. So he, as opposed to some professors, my wife was offered a full ride to Penn State for her doctorate. And then she got talking to the grad students, well, yeah, but his name's going on everything you do until your dissertation's published. Okay, we're out of here. So that wasn't true at this lab. But it's the social sensitivity. Can you read social signals? So I'm working here and I realize Natalie hasn't talked in the last 15 minutes. I get it. I say, whoa, shut up. Nat, we haven't heard from you. What can you say? What do you want to add to this? People are invited in. Or I see a puzzled look on Mary's face. I'm talking and I get puzzlement. I think, shut up and find out what she's concerned about. So I reach out. And it turns out, and again, women authors on this paper. So one criteria, and there's pretty good work in schools that say the same thing. The more men at the table, the less smart the group is. Now that's generalization. There are exceptions. Thank God. And there's also, because I have been at tables where the women are the dominators as well, so it's equal, fine. But here's where that comes from, typically, social sensitivity. There's a linguist named Deborah Tannen who's done brilliant work. She has a book called You Just Don't Understand. I'm going to draw from some of her talks. It's about men and women in conversation. She's also done just some interesting work between how do mothers and daughters talk and what's the linguistic patterns there. But in this case, I meant to go on YouTube and see if this is there. I saw her do this in a talk one day. She has video, and in the video, you plunk some toys in a sandbox, and you put some little boys in the sandbox, and you watch them do parallel play. These little guys will stay here and go vroom, vroom, and without looking at each other for hours. If you've got 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, watch them. Right? They have a grand old time. Sandbox, you plunk some toys in and put some little girls in the sandbox, they immediately turn and co-construct the play. So she's got video, she shows that. Then next piece of tape rolls, and she puts some chairs like this, brings some 9, 10-year-old boys in, and they just sit in the chairs and just have a good old time. They talk. The girls immediately turn the chairs and talk. They do that. Then the camera, little fade out, fade in, and she's in an adult meeting. The guys are talking to the table. The women are craned over, breaking their necks so they can make eye contact with the speaker, or when they talk, they relate. And again, so some of that is socialization. So we have the guys and the women. So notice that's some deep biology there that people get about our presence and how do we influence, how do we co-construct, how do we get smart, how do we co-labor together. So there's some building blocks here that, and here's the important point for each of us in the room. These are the things I've been working on with you. This listening, the presence, the attunement are all things that are in your absolute control. You can start them out Monday morning, next time you're in a meeting. So notice there's some self-coaching here that can be very influential. You are the unit of change. So it's a whole new thing to reflect upon in your work. The other piece here that's parallel, in a parallel universe, is this stuff is the stuff that either makes or breaks trust between teachers and kids. Because kids know when the teacher's not attuned to them, just running the lesson. So there's rapport and credibility that's built off of this as well. Now, the other piece here that's in the brain, isn't that a great book? It's actually a book title, Frans de Waal, one of these annoying primatologists. He's a Dutchman who speaks and writes about 6 language fluency. So English is like his 3rd language, and he writes brilliantly in English. He was looking at that, and he is a primatologist. And he said that here's the issue for primates, and he studied sushi masters. The way you learn to become a sushi master is through imitation. So in a traditional Japanese sushi outfit, I come as an apprentice, and they basically say, here's the broom, sweep. You might sweep for 2 years. You're expected to pay attention to what's going on. And if you're lucky, late at night, one of the masters will show you some technique. Well, as you know, I suspect, apes, chimpanzees particularly, have culture. So for example, that ape is doing something called anting. In some populations, they've learned to stick straws in ants and termite holes and bring them out and lick the insects off. But that's not a universal chimp behavior, only in some populations. The young ones learn from the older ones. Other chimp populations know how to crack big nuts open. Again, that's a cultural embedded behavior. We learn by imitating. With the snow monkeys in Japan, they sometimes give them potatoes. Well, one of the young ones decided not to eat all the dirt. She threw it in the ocean and washed it off. Others went, hey, that's a pretty good idea, and the idea spread. So we talk about Homo sapien, but we are actually Homo imitans. Remember the school I told you about where the teacher leaders and the principals worked on communication skills and went back? They taught by modeling. People pay attention. That's why norms, toxic norms and productive norms spread and sustain. So the question is, what behaviors do you want people to imitate? I was talking to an instructional coach one day in Missouri. I said, how do you know you're making a difference? And she said, when I hear teachers talking to one another now, they talk to one another the way I talk to them. In other words, she built an inquiry model into the school that spread. It was never an assignment. So we're wired. So the question, I guess, this is one of those walk-away questions, no matter what your leadership or participatory role is. What are you modeling that you want people to imitate? One year I had having dinner with a family that I'd had their daughter, and the daughter was just a brilliant mimic, and she started mimicking teachers, which I thought was just funny as hell until she did me. And so they got your moves down. Well, so do your colleagues. They got your moves. Now, how do we get interdependence? And there's 3 types. And this will pull some stuff together, and then we're going to shift and do some tools. There's group to group. We're interdependent. That's huge. And we can design for that. We can amplify that. We can structure for that. We're interdependent with the greater environment. And that is why the trust work with the community, trust work with parents and kids matters. And then between our relationship and our task, we need interdependence between that too. And those are all design goals, and they can be measured if they matter. They're places to look when things fall apart. Because we've got this issue of boundaries. So last piece, this is kind of for physical science teachers. I'm a group member, and I have membranes. Same Latin. It's the outer covering, just as those little ones have a membrane that protects them from the world. Now, what that means is this. It's also that meaning as well. So interesting, member, membrane, same issue. So notice that you as a group member have a covering, but you're also a body or a appendage of. And here's the science bit. And I've got my little Gore-Tex picture there. Boundaries can be permeable. That means things can get through them. Semi-permeable, the brilliance of Gore-Tex, right? That company's great brilliance is polymer chemistry. Semi-permeable means that certain size molecules can get through and certain size can't. So Gore-Tex, meaning rain and snow, can't get through, but perspiration can, or water vapor can, or impermeable. Now, what that means then is this, before I go there. How do you help people adjust their boundaries? Essentially, leadership, trust, collaboration is about building more permeability into the membranes. So people will, quote unquote, let out and take in. And then finally, how do we get them? I'm going to name some quick ones and then we'll go deep. One, group development is first and foremost pattern recognition, which means you have to become a connoisseur of patterns. Now, what that means is the roots of this go back to the late 40s. A guy named Kurt Lewin came out of Austria, out ahead of the Nazis, got to the United States, and he was probably the forefather of group development work. And he said you have to unfreeze groups that have unproductive patterns, but you have to first recognize the pattern. The question we have to ask is this pattern productive or is it not productive? If it's productive, leave it alone, but name it. See, sometimes people are unconsciously competent. They don't know why, and then a group member changes and things fall apart. Well, we already knew why, we just didn't name it. So it's reflection is our goal. But then we have to break pattern. So it's leadership as breaking patterns. And I will guarantee you, groups don't like to have their patterns broken. It's discomforting. You're messing with people. Sometimes it's as simple as how people sit. Why do we have retreats? We break a pattern. Although I have colleagues in Manitoba who say, we quit having retreats, we now have advances. You only retreat when you're losing, right? But you got to break patterns. Patterns of interaction, a pattern of people typing when you should be charting, classic pattern. A pattern of the same two people pair all the time, got to break the pattern, get people to talk. So those are lots of patterns. And then you make patterns. Now this is where you need to be tenacious. And what you heard this morning was a school that's working on pattern making. But you got to be tenacious about pattern making. For example, having someone facilitate is a pattern you got to make. You got to work at it. And then patterns take, and they become the new normal. But that's essentially group development right there in a nutshell. If we're going to build social capital, it takes some hard work. It's not just something that emerges out of the ozone and too much coffee. So here's 5 big ideas, and then we're going to explore these in very practical ways for the last part of our time together. So number 1, you got to balance energy in the group, which means no dominators. You have to have tools that make sure we have equal opportunity to participate, because co-creation and participation means ownership. Energy between task and process is one kind of energy. Between action and reflection, as my friend Bob Garmston, some of you know Bob, says, any group that's too busy to reflect, is too busy to learn, is too busy to improve. So we just keep the gerbil wheel spinning. Structure, and we're going to take a look at structure. You got to structure, and then be explicit. Here's explicitness, the most fundamental group leadership skill I know. Particularly if you're pattern breaking and pattern making. It's a linguistic pattern called what, why, and how. Here's what you're going to do today. For example, when I got you up to do partnering this morning, I said, here's what, here's why. Adults need to know the why, so do kids. Here's why we're doing this. Here's the payoff. What's in it for you? Here's how. That's explicit. And here's the issue I keep learning. What seems patently clear to you is not always clear to a group. When I was a science consultant, I watched this 5th grade class. I knew what they were doing. I was dropping in to do some coaching for the teacher. Kids are in the gym. They're doing a unit on the human body, and they've got bouncy rubber balls, and they've got cones of varying degrees on their heads. Long cones, medium cones, short cones, no cones, and they're doing relay races and collecting data, charting it, trying to understand essentially what tunnel vision is and peripheral vision is. And they got some nice data. Well, the teacher had clearly not done what, why, how, because partway through I heard this girl say to a friend, "Why are we doing this?" Well, back in the classroom are models of the human eye, posters all over the room. Why do I have to tell the kids why we're doing this? Isn't it obvious? Apparently not. What you need to remember is, yes, the group met a month ago, but it may surprise you to know they haven't thought about the group for a month. You have. Why are we here? What are we working on? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then, third point. Colleague and friend Michael Grinder gave us this lovely idea. You need a third point for the conversation. Now, later, we're going to use some text as a third point. Graphics and charts. For example, if you've got ongoing projects, you need to have all that data on a permanent place on the wall to say, here's where we are, here's where we're going. Public recording, third point. Increasingly, I'm using experimenting now with technological third points. We're trying to talk, for example, I first caught it and induced it with primary programs, but I'm seeing secondary teachers. We're trying to talk about how to get kids to be more thoughtful, to deal with things like argument, good conversations. What's a good conversation? So again, it's an iPad world. Grab samples, pop it up on a screen and say, so let's take a look at this conversation. What catches our attention? What do these kids know? What are they able to do? What's your assumption about what's underneath that? And it could be skillful performance or not skillful. When it's up there, we can talk about it. So the idea of a third point, this is 2 point if I'm talking to Natalie. This is third point if I'm talking to Lance. So it really is triangulating it, because the goal, as Michael Grinder would say, is to separate the object from the relationship. Because all we got is a relationship here. I don't want to plunk the idea right between us. It gets in the way. We can work on that. And the other piece is, with a good third point, is it turns it into a thing as opposed to a person. So one of the greatest tricks I've ever learned. So one of the designer's mind question for group work, particularly for conversations that may have some emotions attached, is what's the third point that you're going to use to organize? So again, what am I going to use and how am I going to use it? And then the goal here, particularly if we are trying to deal with cognitive limitations, text as expert. Because here's the issue, particularly for teacher leaders. It's the challenge of not wanting to present oneself as knowing more than peers. I get stuck with that. Well, who made you the boss of us? If I have media or text as the expert, I can get expertise in the room without presenting myself as the expert. So one department head watched her do this a couple times. She'd said, I have a chart stand, good third point, lay out a protocol, then she saved a chair for herself. She would have a partner pre-designated, and then she could join the conversation with the protocol intact. We could talk about the text, what the author said. Psychologically, a lot easier to deal with that, particularly if it's ideas that are counter to current practices. So again, as Michael Grinder would say, give the text the emotion so you don't get it laid on you. Again, nitty-gritty for developing interdependent thought processes. Now, here is, you're with your teams now, so here, this is going to be a little burst in just a minute. I love Marley Goldberg's work. This is from her earlier work. She was a therapist, but she's doing some really interesting work. She has a book called Change Your Question, Change Your Life now. But look at this. Questions are intrinsically related to action. Which means your group is only as good as the questions it's asking. And the issue here for a leadership task then is what questions and how are you framing them? Now here's where you're headed with this, and you've got, I'm going to invite you to think about what's any subgroupings you want to do at your table groups once you know what the task is. Rather than try to, another way of saying that is don't try to operate as a group of 8 on this. But if there's logical subsets in your group, then do that. And here's this, a lovely line. When in doubt, find what the poet says. English teacher alert. Who's this from? Thank you. Full marks, unless they Googled fast, right? So, who asks the more beautiful question? That's great. Now, when you think about your collaborative work, what are the beautiful questions you might ask? And what you're going to do, hence the Post-it notes, and see behind you that I put one on the wall. I want to suggest people along this side, you may want to do a third point. I was testing, it's been up there for a couple hours, so they stick obviously. So if you have wall space, you can do it, or you can certainly use table space, there's clearly not. But here's the task, a question, you're going to generate that. So whatever your working group is, here's your goal. And I'll give you some stems to trigger that. So as you think about your own collaborative efforts, here's the tasks, here's some goals we have, etc. What might be the questions you might ask? So, again, this is not rocket science. I'm just trying to give you some stems for this time of the day to. Yep. And so what you're going to do is generate each question on a Post-it note. There's some larger size ones. I think we dropped some yellows and some blues. Don't use the little mini ones. Write so other people can read. You can, and a couple of, so here, have a process conversation. I don't want to impose. One way to do this is to give each person in your working cluster some think time to generate 1 or 2, and then use those as catalysts for additional questions. So what I'm thinking is probably about 10 minutes for this stage. Again, the context is you think about your work this coming year, it's November. What good questions might motivate, catalyze, inspire your collaborative efforts? Okay, so away you go. Here is a dilemma that's solvable. A friend has sent me this one day, a little email attachment, and it's from a cherub choir in Kansas. If you don't know cherub choirs are like the 1st and 2nd graders. And we have the issue, you walk into meeting rooms and people have what they call norms on the wall, which are ultimately working agreements. I mean, we make, in our adaptive schools work, some of you know, a distinction between norms and working agreements. The problem is, and I find, by the way, working agreements, this is personal opinion, you can have your own, I find them essentially insulting. They're disrespectful. Adults know how to behave. They just don't. So having a list of agreements on the wall doesn't change people's behavior. You're not following our agreement. We said we'd be on time. You're not on time. So what we trigger is internal nagging. Now, ask the 1st graders what the rules should be. Don't sing bad words. Now there's a metaphor. Can we say that to our group? Don't sing bad words in the next meeting? They know. Mr. Jason, I think, is the choir director, so be quiet when he's talking. I love the fact that the kids did their own recording. This is good. Sing loud, but not louder than pretty. I think that should be the working agreement for all adult groups. You can voice it, but don't be ugly. Now, these are vocalists, very important. You know, got to have a rule. That's a good rule to have. We've seen the sign. And don't make fun of others. From the mouths of babes, we got the rules. Number 6, don't sing wrong notes. So we know words and notes. Your music, I would know this, right? And very important, we're all done. Keep your clothes on. Now, assuming that this is choir robes, so I'm guessing that's my inference. So keep your clothes on. So literally or metaphorically, and because it's a cherub choir, we close with. So anytime you walk into a room with a group of working agreements, I suggest you post this instead, as as much meaning. Now, we have a logistical little shift here. There was a couple people who had obligations, and you notice our Canyon City friends decided we're all here together, let's go collaborate, because once they get in the car for their long drive, so they actually decided to go do some work together, which is grown up. So here's the issue. I'm about to go to partners, and I'm going to do one of these lovely adaptive moments. Yes, you have partners, but if you can't find your partner, here is my outcome. So please hear a 2-stage outcome, because it'll save us some time today. You're going to find a partner. If you can find the one I'm going to designate, bully for you, and do that. But if you can't, any other live human in the room will be useful. Okay, now we're going to do a 2-step bit here, which is you're going to find a partner, but designate another pair so that you have a group of 4. You're going to work with your partner, but the group of 4 will be for a future activity. It'll just save a transition. So we're going to do essentially a transition into these partners, and then you'll do transition at the very end back to your home base. So it's going to say this, and there's a prompt on the screen, which is why I'm lacking. You're going to pack and stack and find the player to be named. But here's your task. What are some behavioral things? What are some bits that take people off task? So use that as the starting point for a conversation. So please find that partner. If you can find that person, you know who they are, sit, but make sure you designate a quartet as you do that. And again, if you can't, just find some players. I like it. You're good to go. I like it. I'm thinking, what's that? With the principal? Yeah, she left at noon, so I think she went to check the boiler. So find anybody who's wandering. For example, looks like there's someone standing by herself right here. Okay? So this is the point where anybody will work. You need a partner, and you're sitting with another pair so that you have a pair and then a quartet. Brilliant. Well done. I like your style. Come join us. Come, and you are malleable, so that's good. Okay? Okay? And please pause, because I'm going to ramp up the structure here. So you've primed the pump. Again, now you're going to do this with your partner. I think we'll exhaust Post-it notes, but what you're about to do is some of the things you're talking about right now, the off-taskness, write each discrete idea on a separate Post-it note. So if you haven't gotten there, go there. So I hopefully primed the pump. So what gets people off task? And it says index card, but do record them. One per. That's my mistake. One difference, yeah. Got no problem with that. You want to use what you've heard? I could give you 6 more ideas, or you could apply the 4 that you've got. Okay, okay? Now, you'll notice that what you see on the left, we refer to in our work as crafting the container. There is the simplest design I know for running a meeting. I'm bringing colleagues together, that little box on the left. How do we start a conversation? Notice, by the way, how not to design a meeting. If you have a list of topics, you don't have a design. It's like saying a lesson plan is about this content, not about these kinds of skill developments. So notice for educators, a meeting needs to have a lesson design. It needs to have a plan. We don't say to teachers, oh, why don't you just go in your class tomorrow and wing it? But we think we can wing meetings. Collaboration time needs design. Well, if I notice metaphorically, how would I start a conversation? Notice I said balance the energy. That means that guy up front isn't doing the talking. People at the table are talking. How do you structure it? We're going to drop there, and then clearly the goal is how would we sustain, which implies, by the way, the transfer of coaching skills to the meeting room. Early on, we were doing cognitive coaching work, in fact, in this state. Notice the most bizarre meeting I was ever in. It was a bunch of very skilled cognitive coaches who were doing all the crap you guys have on your table right now. They had not occurred to them that those coaching tools applied when they had more than 2 people in the room. They hadn't transferred it. No paraphrasing, no pausing, no inquiry. Teach for transfer. Now, 2 big structural chunks you're going to read about. Size. How do you adjust the size? And that depends on the emotional and the cognitive load of the task. See, we sometimes have too big emotional load, too big a cognitive load for a task, hence too big a group. The pair is the safest unit of interchange, particularly if we have low trust and introverts. You got to get it to a unit I'm willing to share. Composition, you're going to read about who's in the pairs, and then how much time should a pair be together. I run groups where there's a group of 4, so there's a pair, but as soon as I just move one person, we rearrange the pairs. In a 45-minute meeting, everyone should be able to interact in a small group with everyone else. You just got to get people to stand up, sit in a new chair. Once ran a meeting, and I won't name the state, but I had the ex-governor, the college president, and some technology whiz kids at the table, and a couple of principals, and a couple of teachers. Well, you have to hose down governors and college presidents because they're used to people listening to them because they have positional power. But you don't have to say, shut up, governor. You say, talk to your neighbor. You just take the group away, essentially. Take the group away. Annoy that person, not all of us. Right? No. And then a chunk here. So here's the task. It's called read and apply. Very simple. You're going to read that first section and think about the sticky notes you've created. If you were to apply those concepts of group size, composition, length of time, how might it interrupt some of the patterns you wrote in? So move those sticky notes into a category. Then do the same thing with interaction patterns. How would what you read about there interrupt and build a more productive pattern? And what you're going to discover, I suspect, is more of a Venn than discrete categories. So again, it's thinking, and there may be, by the way, don't force fit, there may be some outlier pieces, but this is the fundamental stuff of structuring for success. Okay, so my hunch is 10, I'll watch at about the 10, 11 minute mark. I'll check in to see where you are in time rather than a public timer. Okay, so it's late in the afternoon. Some of you are secondary teachers and secondary people, so your brains are starting to shut down. So do a check for understanding. Make sure you and your partner agree that you're doing the same task. So clarify the task and then have at it. Structure's your friend. But remember the what, why, how pattern when you're imposing a structure that breaks pattern. Now, here's the issue. High-performing groups are never harmed by structure. Low-performing groups absolutely need structure. We don't just say to kids, you four go in the corner and work it out. We scaffold. Why do we think adults don't need scaffolds? Particularly if we want to be time efficient, maximally productive, and maximally engaging. So we have balance in maximum participation. Now, the designer's mind, I'm drawing here from some work, a book that we only use for seminars. We haven't put it out in the world yet. We've got to do a further work called Leading Groups. And we're discovering that the calls we're getting are more and more these days from teacher leaders, particularly secondary department heads, because we've done tag, you're it, go have a good group, and we've given them no tools. So hence the calls come in and you go work with them. We're also discovering that groups that want to get skillful at with data can't be skillful with data if they don't know how to be a group and when people don't know how to facilitate. So we're seeing a lot of data teams flounder because they don't have enough structure as well. Plop data into the middle of a low-performing group. Notice task, relationship, we don't have social capacity for the demands of the task. Well, here is designer's mind then in this. 1, anticipate. And so you can make choices based on what you just read. Anticipate meaning, and I use the phrase cognitive load and emotional load, which is also compounded by time of day, time of year. High stress times, lots of structure, and tell people why. I was once running a meeting on a Friday before vacation with a snowstorm coming into a district. Had to have the meeting. And I said, would you be offended if I was like Attila the facilitator? And they said, no, go for it. We want to get it done. And so I was a pretty hard-ass facilitator. And they said, thank you. We got it done 30 minutes and got out the door. If I don't say that, I just look like some annoying guy from out of town. But high structure. We told them why. So anticipate the need. And so that means pairing, materials. Usually when I see skillful groups, they've got baskets on the table full of highlighters, Post-it notes, index cards, keep them stocked. They got chart paper, markers, chart stands. They've got the tools in the room so they can flex. But I can anticipate and also pick a strategy. Some of you know a book called Groups at Work. And that our intention there was people don't have enough toolkit they can get at fast. You need tools. So, okay, there's a good strategy. I can apply it to this topic and I can structure it this way. And then monitor. We make choices. Surprise, surprise. Sounds like good teaching, doesn't it? We thought we'd do this in pairs. Is that working? Yeah, good. Stay with it. Maybe not enough energy. Or I've tried things with 4s and they were just the wrong energy, so let's just adjust and go to pairs, which is called recovery. Running groups and leading groups is ultimately an improvisational act. But to improvise well, you need a toolkit. If you know a basic blues progression, you start playing it, other musicians that know blues progression can add in, can chime in. So to improvise well, I need tools. And I also need enough confidence to recover. And you do not lose points with groups for recovery. You get points. No recovery loses points. As my friend Kendall Zoller says, recovery is how to step out of it when you stepped in it. Used to be an AP bio teacher, and I watched him one day. He flubbed a direction, totally confused the kids, and he said, guys, wait. If he had said that correctly and clearly, here's what he would have said. He redid the direction. Well, recovery. I thought we could handle quartets. You know, guys, the energy feels a little funny, so let's try pairs, and here's why I'm thinking that right now. So notice recovery is just based on what you just read about. Are they too large, too small, wrong people? Once did an RTI project where we had to make sure we had department heads from several high schools, but we also had ELL and SPED with each team. We had to think, what other voices do they need to have at the table to talk about that? Plus we're talking about viable curriculum. Okay? Time. Too long, too short in any given pair. You can build a nice burst of energy just by repartnering real fast. And again, that's one of those patterns over time. When you have that pattern of shifting partners, you don't have to explain it every time. Let's just shift, little energy burst. Find someone you haven't worked with yet. And it's also how you build a culture. Because if I've done a real task with you, I start to know how you think. I know more about you, about what you care about. We get deeper relationships. And obviously, tight or loose. Again, check with the group. I'm going to use this kind of protocol, and I'm going to do a fairly interesting different kind of type protocol with you in a minute. But it can be adjusted, and I'll talk when we're done about variants on the protocol I use with you. We can tighten it, we can loosen it. Round robin is a tight protocol if you enforce the no crosstalk. Everyone gets voice. That's a fairly tight protocol, but you have to tell people why. Why? And then we got this stuff. Again, it sounds like Classroom Management 101, but you've only got 62 minutes to have an important meeting. Don't waste time sending somebody down the hall looking for Post-it notes. Or, where's the chart paper? Or, who's got the dongle for the Apple, for the Mac, right? All that stuff, right? And then, test your technology, right? Thank you, Liz. Test your technology, right? Make sure it works. Oh, no bandwidth? Well, so much for that webinar, right? Again, straightforward things. And furniture. Furniture is the great killer of collaboration. I think it's going to be our MiraVR company. I'm going to start marketing chainsaws to slice up big conference room tables. Because they've killed more groups than anything else. That's why flexible furniture really, and most rooms have more flexibility than you think. The furniture is not bolted down. Move it. Once was working with a bunch of principals. I had data from the instructional coaches about what principals needed to know about how to maximize their value. And we had charted all that, and I'd been working with the principals, and I had them all clear the furniture. We posted all that data up on charts as a third point and did horseshoes of chairs. Had a very different interaction because they could look at the materials without having to look at one another because the data was about them. So in the middle of the day, move it. Just rearrange it. You don't have to get stuck. And again, that's a pattern break. A pattern break. So some very simple things that are just the fundamentals to making this group kind of work, this kind of stuff work. Well, we're going to do a last piece, and I'm doing this because I think it's the real most powerful thing. Please make sure you are in now a group of 4. Poof, you're a group of 4. You're no longer a pair. And groups of 4 will need tables. So if you will, and if you're feeling hemmed, there are 2 tables over here that can absorb some groups. So if you'll sit and in your group of 4, while I do a logistical piece and I get some help from the back, make sure you know who the people are at your table. So do a little intros if you've not yet done that. So the important thing is to record. So here's a phase. Given the title, what are your predictions or speculations about what that phrase might mean in the context of this piece of text? And you write it down. Here's what we think that's going to mean. And I'm using this at this time of day to kind of pull the whole day together, both by process and by content. In fact, I heard someone use almost that phrase today in a small group. What does it mean to be a member of a telling culture and how does that might contrast with the title? Another phrase, what might that mean? So you're anticipating what the authors have said about this. Wow, dichotomous, either or, yes, no. And the tyranny of or. So speculate. Again, and here's the power of speculation. It's okay to be wrong. Right? And then, so in the yellow, here's your task. Should, I'm guessing, take you about 10 minutes. I'm going to sample after you've had a chance to speculate. Don't go rummaging looking for the text. So if you found the text, close it up so it's not distracting you. So that's your task. And by the way, this is right out of classroom practice. It's just an adult version of that. Okay, so away you go. So recorder, you're going to be a recorder / facilitator. So don't let the group get ahead of you. It's on that, what's that color called? I have the peach or salmon. You have a salmon colored recording sheet. So go for it.
I wonder too if this is partly connected to that idea of being present, you know, that you're
actively listening. You're listening for understanding.
Yeah.
What do you think about this tyranny of or? Like, I almost wonder if people get to or phrases, or we could do this, you know what I mean, then you walk away without a shared decision, you know what I mean, without a shared action step, without a shared, you know what I mean? I feel like it, but I'm not sure about this.
I guess, I was going to say, I guess the word that is, where I'm stuck is the tyranny, because I guess I see or as a good thing, because it expands the possibilities and the ideas and actions, you know, all of those pieces.
Yeah.
And so the part that I'm not connecting to is the tyranny of war.
Yeah, I'm not either. Because to me, that or piece goes here and eliminates that idea of being
right on the
judged.
sheet, just so it stands still.
Okay. So like, I guess flexibility,
Yeah,
you know.
flexible thinking.
Yeah, is that about flexible thinking, or like having too many objectives or goals to focus on? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Too many questions.
In a school setting, you know, we're all working together to promote student achievement and to build success with our students. And what that looks like in a year or 3 years or 5 years, you want to focus on the future and how you're going to reach those goals and how you're going to get your teachers to where they need to be and your students to where they need to be. So I think the spirit of inquiry, those questions that you ask, should always be moving you forward to reaching your vision of what your school is going to look like and what your students are going to look like in the future.
I wonder if it also means, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, that kind of loyalist mentality where I'm as invested in your student success as my own student success, and it's like they're all of our kids, and it's really important that you meet your goals and I meet my goals, and it's really important to me that you meet your goals, kind of that it's not just about my personal kind of success, but it's the investment in the greater good of the school, or that the greater good of the team, or that everybody's got to be successful for me to be successful?
It's interesting. So as you mentioned the school, my brain was entirely in the classroom. That's how I was thinking, but I never thought about it.
So would the approach of the group piece, this is the two major overarching ideas. I mean, I hate to call things negatives, but these are negative behaviors. These are positive behaviors. We said that would be negative. Tyranny or horror.
Yep. And that perhaps these two might be related.
Yeah.
But I think a telling culture could be positive because you could, if you have a growth mindset in everything you do, that's telling about the thinking of that group. Or if you have that closed mindset.
So please pause. I'm going to jump in here.
That's the big question.
For our purposes. Now, what's one that you think I wouldn't bet my neighbor's lunch money on? We think we really stretched for that one. We're not have no low. Basically, what's a low confidence speculation? We did high confidence. What's a low confidence? Thank you. So this one here, acting out our beliefs. And what did you speculate?
We had a couple ideas of whether we really were trying to figure out acting out. Is that a negative connotation or a positive connotation? Because it could be positive in the fact of your modeling, or it could be negative of, you're acting out in an
So,
aggressive.
yeah, the phrase acting out can get interpreted in two different directions. Okay, thank you. So not quite sure. Okay, now, here's your task. I'm going to take you to text, and so there's an important piece. Notice, because you have done this speculating, how it influences your experience of the text. So you have to be metacognitive as you read. And then, and you're saying, yeah, I see. And then, when everyone in your group has read, go back and correct or clarify your splash. So rewrite it. Okay, where you go. And there's the pages. So you see the pages on the screen.
Collectively, so what you bring as an individual and what you have as a group as a whole, I think it does kind of get to that identity. How about the acting out our beliefs?
Which one?
Acting out our beliefs about the world.
Well, it says in the end, what we talk about and how we talk to one another is a way of acting out our beliefs about the world, the way it works. So
how we treat others.
How we treat others. So that we were way off.
Way off.
That one.
And then the last one, investment in our personal and collective futures. And it's all about that together. Together we make an investment. The personal and the collective of the group, we make an investment.
But they also say, though, that it goes to the topic, and by promoting a spirit of inquiry, we're doing that investment in what we're going to do. So it ties together.
Good job, group. Good job, group. How cool. I want to tell teachers about this. What a great
I know. It's like
idea.
Isn't it this? Yeah, I could see it.
This one is the word splash is awesome.
Yes.
It's kind of
yes. Are you kidding me?
But this idea of taking the phrases out of there and then coming back, and it really makes you think. I mean, it's outstanding.
But it's a different way to even look at an article. Like, for example, I'm thinking about that teacher collaboration article that I was going to share with you guys. But wouldn't it be cool if you spent the weekend working on this? If I did this, if I
just slipped that right in there.
She ignored it. Did you notice that too? But how easy?
It's not going to take that long.
No, because I already read
Grab a couple phrases.
Yeah. But I could make one of these, and then in our PLC group, we could go through that. That'd be kind of fun.
That's
And
fantastic.
it's like a jigsaw, but not a jigsaw, right?
Well, but I really think it takes you to some higher order thinking. That's the part from this that really takes
Well,
you
and as
from
you said,
that.
it so sets your purpose, not only your purpose for reading, but your desire to read it. Like, so I can get it down.
When you've done this, and I've actually done this as much with kids as I've done with adults, but the same patterns hold. Once you've done this, and then if the content was really germane, obviously you need a summary. So any kinds of summarizing techniques, graphic organizers you can add. The next step, and by the way, when this has been tested, the recall is off the scale. By the way, I tested this with some 7th graders once. We did this and retested a month later, bang. It had the content. So pretty efficacious strategy. But once you've done it a couple of times, the next bit is to have students for homework or adults make their own splash. So the assignment is, that once they got the concept, read the text, extract key ideas, and then work with a partner, share, compare. Now, with adult groups, the question is, how do we move some of the work off stage so people come in anticipating? This is an example of saying, we're going to work on this piece of text. Read it ahead of time, pull out some key ideas, be prepared to share your key ideas, and make the case for the key ideas with your neighbor. And it's a test for commitment to the group. Notice that that makes a presumption that people will invest in the group by essentially doing their homework for the group. But you need some leverage as an example of, yes, that's my goal, but I need a tool to get there. And I would suggest that of all this work today, before we return to home bases, how do we link then social capital to collaboration, to this notion of a community of learning and a community of thought? And the deepest manifestation of a community of thought is the ability to, and the tenacity to, inquire and inquire and inquire. You're only as good as your questions. And questions ultimately are a manifestation of values and beliefs. Because what we value, we inquire into. And what we avoid is also values and beliefs as well. To close out, please return to your home base so you have the closure bit with your close colleagues, and we'll then go from there. There was a Google Doc, and we're going Plan B now, because you've got the paper and pencil. So it's called If Then, one of the simplest assessment and summary tools we've ever invented. Notice, it says if. I remember to. It's actually a pretty good coaching question. Good closure for a conversation. If I remember to, then I'll be able to. So notice your if should drive your then. So what are you taking away at that level personally from the day? And once you've done it and you've crafted it, then again, round robin, share with your colleagues. And then I'll turn to a local voice to close this all out.
That if I remember to think about the power of social capital when structuring the professional learning opportunities and the way that participants interact with one another, then I would be able to consider the power of the inquiry and collaborative thinking and plan for it more in my opportunities. Also, that would help me to be more productive in my group meetings. That led me to my second, if I remember to, which is one thing you said, avoiding topics on your agenda. Yeah. I really thought that was pretty important to say, it's not about topics, it's about the collective learning. And so if I could remember to avoid topics, then I'll be able to have stronger collaboration, and the members of the group would have more ownership in what we're doing collectively.
Mine is not that long.
I don't like the word make, but I put if I remember to make the group do the work, then I'll be able to see them achieve a higher level of success. But for me to make them do the work, what has to happen is collaboration. They have to have resources. You have to encourage inquiry. And have to promote ownership. There's a lot to that.
There is a lot there.
That is a lot. All right, we circled the horn,
We
as you
did.
said.
Yes, we did.
Navigate the distinctions between comfort and safety. Your group should be safe, but they won't always be comfortable. I would propose that to do this work well, the greatest disposition any of us needs as a group member, as a group leader, is comfort with discomfort. If you're not willing to discomfort other people, then you're not willing to help them learn. And also probably not willing to learn ourselves. So I think the last bit here is a little Kierkegaard. Every moment, every one of us is making a choice. And we need to remember, and I think help our colleagues remember, that they too are making choices. And so in tough times, I think one of the greatest gifts we give our colleagues is the notion that they can make choices and they can choose to make other choices about who they are and how they are with one another. So thank you for making the choice to be here today and be present.